Who's in? Didn't we just say that a few minutes ago? No, that was about 12 hours ago. Hopefully you could join us live last night after all the big championship games, our call-in show. But if you didn't, hey, you're an early riser, probably not a late night sort. And so you are here right now, and that's all that counts. And all that counts is what those 13 folks believe in that conference room, whether persuaded, influenced by outside forces or not. It's what they believe. It's what they put down and what they deliver to ESPN in just a few minutes that we are watching together. Welcome into the voice of college football. I believe some of you have just joined us here in the last few days, so we appreciate you being here. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. The mouth doesn't necessarily work right out of bed, but hang with me here. We'll get it done with all of you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here with all of you, not based on my knowledge or insight, but based on your participation. Yes, here we go. And we are awaiting a college football playoff selection in many ways unlike any other. First of all, let's understand that instead of having four that seem to deserve it, have earned it, are probably close to the best, and then maybe one straggler out there that people are fighting for, that 4 to 5 slots, those being the ones under consideration, we truly have 7 teams. We truly have 7 teams that have qualifications, that have an argument, a legitimate argument, not we're Oregon and we're number 4 in the football power index type of argument, but legitimate arguments to reach the Final Four. I believe that 5 of those teams, 5 of those schools should be given serious consideration. And then 2 outliers that based on talent, based on only losing 1 game, based on losing to possibly the 2 best teams in the country. I'm talking Ohio State and Georgia have some kind of outside. They don't really have a shot. They shouldn't have a shot, but they have an argument. That's what they have, is an argument. And there are many of you, as we learned last night and already knew, that many of you say, screw the resumes to a certain extent, screw the results on the field. Let's select the 4 best teams. And some of that's based on recent history and a school like Georgia showing that, yes, championship medal, they've got it. The head coach, the coaching staff, many of the players that have come back that are gunning for a 3rd consecutive national championship, or for maybe some of those players, a 2nd national championship, that holds weight with you. And Ohio State, to a much lesser degree, showing that big stage talent, all of that should be recognized. Many of you, though, Florida State, they're obviously the biggest controversy in all of this. Should they be a controversy? And I just stated that this is, in many ways, the most unprecedented selection that we've seen in its 10th season. And the Florida State issue is one of the major reasons why. Most of us never thought that we would get to a place where an undefeated Power 5 team with a championship would be discarded. And that's a very real possibility here. And based on all the evidences and the reports that have been leaked out there, as we look at the notable selection criteria from the selection committee, conference championships 1, strength of schedule is head-to-head and head-to-head competition. Wow, that's the bullet point number 2. Haven't seen these in a long time. Comparative outcomes of common opponents without incenting margin of victory. Other relevant factors such as unavailability of players, and did not get to see the rest, but some nuances there. We know what the Florida State situation is, and we obviously can't come up with a consensus. And that's what makes this sport so great, among other things. The product on the field and the pageantry and the history and the tradition and all that, first and foremost. But in terms of debate, it's the best debate sport. It is the best debate sport. And we saw that last night. Many of you are ardent supporters of Florida State. Not that you care about Florida State or fans of Florida State, but you simply believe they've earned it on the field. So regardless, they could have lost 13 players last night against Louisville. What if that happened to a team at some point? God forbid. There was this incredible rash of injuries or some type of situation. We don't want to go past that, but some kind of situation that just raided a team of 14 players, key players. They're gone. What would we do with that? Well, we've got one quarterback in Jordan Travis, who's one of the top five, roughly top five quarterbacks in college football. He's gone. He's gone for sure. We saw Tate Rodemaker, his backup, play a very pedestrian role and performance against a Florida defense that's been fairly mediocre and torn to shreds at times. Rivalry game, though, on the road, first start, he'll get better. But then even Tate Rodemaker not available last night in the ACC championship game. So he was not able to improve upon that performance, show that he's an improving quarterback, that he can take one start against a quality opponent. I put that term in quotes. It depends on a Power 5 opponent, an SEC opponent that won 5 games this year and played some pretty bad defense at times, but still, athletes are out there, no doubt. And he could improve upon that. He could elevate the next week against a defense that by all metrics is better, Louisville, maybe not as talented, not as highly recruited, that's for sure, and elevate, but we didn't get a chance to see that. So we've got an unprecedented situation. Power 5 champion, 13-0. They are the crux of this decision. And then their entry brings us to Texas and Bama. Maybe Texas and Bama are both in because Florida State's out. Maybe the committee is going to be able to stand on the eye test, stand on the injury factor, and just kind of lean back on that and say, it's one of the factors. We're talking about one of the most important players in the country. Talking about a quarterback who is a dynamic playmaker. And in many ways, the Florida State wide receivers, of course, we know that that's a top 5 room in college football. And so the quarterback situation attaches itself to the wide receiver situation because that is the most dependent position in sports, certainly in football. You can have great wide receivers all over the place. If the ball doesn't fly in the air in their vicinity, they can't do anything. They are the most dependent players on the field. And so Florida State's taking some of its best players, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, others, Shaheem Bell. And in a sense, they're ineffective because of the situation at quarterback. Appreciate you all being here. Let's get to some of your comments and questions. We'll leave the link in the chat. If I knew exactly when they were going to make these selections, if it was going to be in the next few minutes, then we'd leave the call-ins on hold to get through this and run through the rankings and get there. If I remember correctly, in past seasons, they've delivered the top 6, and then they'll go back and do the rankings, which most of you could care less about the rest of the rankings. I still like to see what is the thought process. And of course, those rankings especially don't mean anything because they don't update them after postseason play. So unlike the AP and the coaches poll, which is just the next step and the next to final step to the final rankings for those of you who care about the final rankings and whether your team finishes number 5 or number 8, that's taken out of play here with the college football playoff rankings. Resume comparison. Here it is between Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Florida State. And again, I would argue that Ohio State should be on that line as well. I'm not saying that they should be selected, but they should be on this line based on a number of factors. Schedule strength of record. We've got Florida State at 3, Bama 4, Texas 5, Georgia 7. Strength of schedule. Bama's number 5, Texas 13, Georgia 37, Florida State 55. Top 25 wins. I just think that's an indicator. Some of you folks know what I think about top 25 rankings. And so I think that's only an indicator. Okay, you're 3-1 against the top 25. Okay, at what point in the top 25? Sometimes that's measured time of kickoff. Sometimes that's the current top 25. And then also let's understand that there are 15 plus teams in college football that are just as good as the bottom of the top 25. So it's just a barometer. It looks nice. All the teams should be ranked. This was done fairly and equitably, and also in a practical fashion. Practically, every team would be ranked. If you can rank 25 teams, why wouldn't you rank other teams? And actually, this is kind of a certain soapbox item of mine. There's like 40 teams that get ranked every week. It's not just 25. They just choose not to put numbers next to the other teams that they ranked because they ranked them. All right. I'm going to take in your comments and questions. Appreciate all of you being here. I have dropped the link in the chat, so please join me. But in the meantime, Douglas is saying, no one thinks Bama deserves to make it. Gee, Douglas, I appreciate that comment, but I don't know that you get around much. All right, let's get into some calls. And for anybody that calls, my apologies, because once they go to this unveiling, we're going to, don't need to cut you off. If I'm in the middle of a call or just took a call, we'll just put you backstage and we can wait through the rankings unveil and go from there. But I believe they'll do the top 6. They'll argue that and debate that for 15 or 20 minutes. Then they'll show us the rest of the rankings. All right, let's get to it right here at the Voice of College Football. We got Mooley on the line. Hello.
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm not gonna lie. I thought I saw the rankings come out, but then I saw those the AP rankings, so I don't really have anything right now. Yeah, but I guess I'll say this. So, because I just kind of joined in, could you just say real quick who you think, or if you are willing to reveal who you think
Yes.
are the 4 teams that deserve to be in?
Yeah. And that's a key phrase right there, deserve to be in. So the 4 that I believe deserve to be in are Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and Texas.
And that's because Florida State's, undefeated and also had a win. Okay, for sure.
Yeah, those are not the 4 best teams in my estimation.
Right. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I do think Bama should go in. And I understand there's the debate between deserve and best teams and stuff, but also I do think when it's this close, in my opinion, if it's this close, there is enough of a deserve. I would say Bama also has enough of a deserving thing to where it's like as much as Florida State impressed this season, it's not the same team that won through the ACC. And
yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, I do want to talk about this more, but I'm just kind of waiting to see how it is. I do have some more thoughts. It's just
okay. We can keep you backstage, and I can pop you right back on here after the rankings are unveiled. We can do that. And believe me, first of all, I think Alabama is one of the 4 best teams in the country. So in this strange season, I actually have 3 of my 4 best teams aren't even teams that I would put in the playoff. So I do believe that we got to honor the championships and got to honor the undefeated record and all of that sort of thing. And then Bama has the unfortunate situation of playing Texas head to head and losing that game, and they're in direct competition.
Right. And the thing is, like, I do understand. I feel like there's a line you need to balance too. Because I remember last year there were Bama fans saying that, oh, Bama's one of the 4 best teams. They should still be in. They lost 2 very close games on the road. And I'm like, no, I don't care if Bama's, you could say they're better than TCU. They should not be in over TCU. And I held that ground. But now I feel like it's a little bit more different. And and one thing that I was gonna say this more like if Oregon won, but this scenario may not apply as much because Florida State has an undefeated record, whereas Bama won has 1 loss. But I still this could apply because the sole argument that a lot of people are saying is, well, they shouldn't have lost to Texas, and I'm saying, well, if that's the case, if the sole reason for the argument is they shouldn't have lost in the early season, then I think that might put a bad standard for the future where teams are going to say, why should I schedule out of conference early in the season if I'm going
Yep,
to risk a loss, And
absolutely.
we might see more teams scheduling like Michigan or Georgia.
But the catch 22 to that, and I completely agree with that because I don't want there to be lack of incentive to schedule tough non-conference games because we need those to be able to compare the conferences, and therefore we can better compare teams when we've got a collection of good non-conference games, Florida State, LSU, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, Alabama, etc. Then we can start to put something together. But the problem is the catch 22 is that they did play the game. So the
Yeah,
game
Florida
has to
State.
be evaluated.
Right. Florida State did play the game, which is why it's different as compared to if Oregon had won. However, Bama also played the game. And yeah, I know that I know they still have the loss too, and Florida State at least played the game. But yeah, yeah, I'll just hop by. I'm just kind of thinking about it still. Yeah.
Well, I will say this before I let you go that I am not going to raise any kind of like, I'm not going to be flipping tables or throwing a fit if Alabama's in there. Not at all. I think that they've earned the spot. I just think there's not enough spots here based on the criteria that the committee pushes most. I just read it off conference championships and head to head. Those were the first 2 bullet points.
Hmm.
So that looks pretty obvious. But I don't think it's a situation where there's been a couple situations in now 10 years of the playoff where I just thought a team got completely ripped off. But I, Alabama's played a great season, no doubt. So I
For
believe
sure.
they're one of the 4 best teams in the country.
For sure. And real quick, I'm looking at these comments because I've been seeing this a lot about the miracle against Auburn. Yes, we that was a complete miracle that we won that game. But but if we're going by based on, oh well, they should have lost to Auburn. Well, Florida State should have lost to Boston College or Clemson. So if we're going to use that as an argument as oh that should be the reason, I think I'm just saying that for the comments I'm seeing the 12-0 conference champion argument is a better argument than, oh well, Bama should have just lost to a bad Auburn team, which by the way is our rival and a big rival. And no matter how bad Auburn is, they always give us issues in Jordan Hare, and that's the same with all the other rivalries with Washington and Washington State, for example. Washington played a close one against a rival team, but I don't think they shouldn't be necessarily doxxed for that. I mean, they're not because they're undefeated, but if they were in that case, for example.
Well, when you bring up the rivalry situation, there's validity to what you're saying, but it's not set in stone that you can make some kind of an excuse that, oh, we were playing a rival. That's always going to be a tough game. we can go through the history of all these rivalries, and there's plenty of blowouts. It's not like down to the wire every year among these teams. Mooley, I believe they're going to go to the unveiling here, so we'll talk to you in a few minutes.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so again, the rivalry thing, I get. Michigan's number one. They should be. Okay, there they are. So the rivalry aspect of this, I get. I think there's something to it, but it's not just an automatic excuse. We played like crap and we struggled because we played a rival. No, we can go through the litany of series of rivalries from all these teams and all these rivalries, and you can point to most of the time really good teams that are top 5 level teams crush teams that are mediocre, barely bowl teams. Most of the time. Do they struggle? Yeah, I don't know that they struggle anymore in those situations than they do just against another team in the conference. All right, we got Michigan number 1, 13-0 for a second consecutive year. And then Washington, the other healthy 13-0 conference championship team. Washington, wow. Really good football team. Excellent quarterback. Wide receivers are good. The rest of the team, pretty mediocre. So if we're talking about where they should be ranked, I got them at the same spot, and we'll have them same spot, top 25. That actually makes sense coming out later. I don't believe they're really like a second best team in the country. Like when I think about this Washington team right now, and I compare them to who's been a number 2 seed in the past. The 2014 Oregon team, some Clemson teams, some Alabama teams, an Ohio State team in 2019. They're not that. They're not that team. Texas, there we go. That gives us a lot right there. That gives us a whole bunch right there. So they're not number 3. They're not number 4. They are number 3. There is Texas. Okay, so we're going to get a big drama buildup here. I think we're going to get 6, then 5, then 4. And the Texas folks are going crazy, and they earned it. And man, this college football season could have been so much different because much like Bama a week ago on the Plains, Texas survived some really mediocre, I'm being kind, opponents. And in the case of Houston, a bad opponent. So Texas, but they had to play without Quinn Ewers. And then when they got him back, of course, he's going to be possibly a little rusty. So some of those struggles with and without. All right. Well, we've got Alabama, Georgia, and Florida State. To me, Georgia has nothing to go on here, except for that they're a really good team. That's one of the 4 best teams in the country by eye test and by many measurements. But you got to win the games. Ohio State got to win the games when they really matter. If you're going to lose a game, should have lost that South Carolina game when you were down by 2 touchdowns in September and come back and won the rest of them, and that be your one loss. Or Ohio State, you should have beat Michigan and lost to Rutgers. So who you lose to obviously matters because there are direct comparisons to be made, and Alabama beat Georgia just like Texas beat Bama. So I'm expecting to see Florida State at 6, Georgia at 5, and no, we got Georgia at 6, so I was going with a little intel there that somebody passed on last night. This makes more sense. Georgia at 6. And now it comes down to, are we going to honor the undefeated season? Or are we going to take a team that lost a game? We're going to do an unprecedented thing here. We got Bama at 4, Florida State at 5. There you go, Florida State fans. Go nuts. And you should go nuts because what else can you do? What else can you do? So this is the biggest example against the objectivity of this entire process. This is obviously a subjective call made to say their quarterback's injured, they're out. Jordan Travis, I would actually say if Jordan Travis would have played these last two games and the scores were exactly the same, that Florida State would be in. They're making a selection based on the injury status. And some of you agree with that. Some of you do not. I understand it. It's actually baked into the criteria. So at least they're covered from that standpoint. They didn't just make this up at the last second and say, oh, we've been doing this for 10 years, but all of a sudden, you know what? A quarterback got hurt, so we're going to take that into consideration. It is part of the process. So that is valid, even if you don't agree with it. It's like targeting. Even if you don't agree with it, it is in the rule book that they will take that under consideration. And they did. So Florida State was number 4 last week. And so they dropped to 5 after they won a conference championship game against number 14 by 10 points. Bama beat number 1. Whether Georgia should have been number 1, they beat them by 3 points in a pretty decisive win. Not a rout by any stretch. It was a great ball game, but it wasn't like it went down to the wire, throws into the end zone, anything like that. They gave up the touchdown to make it closer, 27-24, and then they held. Yeah, my top 25 is coming out a little bit later. Okay, now that we've got the 6, we will take our calls. Wounded Wolverine. There he is.
This is the biggest crock of crap I've ever seen in my college football fan life.
Yeah, Alabama.
Well, I mean, I'm okay with playing Alabama. I would, if it's a choice between playing Alabama or Texas, roll Tide all the way. Texas scares me. Texas has, I would say they probably have the best front four in the country.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't talking about who you're playing. I was just talking about who made it.
Yeah.
It's Bama.
I mean, at this point, the committee should just meet in September and say, okay, we're going to take these 10 teams, the best 4 out of these 10 teams. I mean, obviously not now because it's going to 12, but okay, only you guys qualify. You know, if they can just basically tell all the Syracuses and the Illinois and the Baylors and the Arizona States of the world, I don't care if you go 13-0, go piss. You know, you won't matter because we don't think you're the best team right now. It doesn't matter what you do on the damn field. You're not one of the best teams. We don't like you. Kick sand. It's just the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't think there should be a 3-letter cheat code that automatically gets you into the playoffs, regardless of skill, regardless of outcome, regardless of record. You should have to earn it, and the SEC bottom line did not earn it. This is not an argument. Taking a team that lost at home by double digits over a team that went 13-0, kiss my ass. I'm sorry, Mark. Committee can kiss my ass. I'm not trying to stump for Florida State, but I was wanting one of two scenarios going into yesterday because both were alive with a Washington win. I either wanted somehow Ohio State to still sneak into the playoffs. For, one, I'd like to beat them again. And two, it's just better financially for the Big Ten. Or I wanted to see the SEC get shut out of this playoff. The second one actually came down to what I thought should have happened. Because all the cards lined up. This should have been Michigan 1, Washington 2. I think that was set in stone. Now, is Texas better than Florida State? Yeah, but 13-0 should still mean something. And it's not like Florida State, they didn't win the Sun Belt. They didn't win Conference USA. They still won a Power 5 conference, undefeated. They still had to beat Louisville. And honestly, I wish DeReal was here because I want to punch Kentucky. I think Kentucky beating Louisville was probably the committee's excuse for saying that Louisville was not a good win. I think if Louisville had beaten Kentucky, Florida State would have gotten in.
Well, that could be. again, if the committee was going to use this kind of lean, I just wish that they would have done this in previous years. You had a Notre Dame Cincinnati situation, and I know that they did make the direct ouster of one of these teams based on head-to-head. They got around that because they didn't have to choose between Texas and Alabama. They chose to knock out Florida State, and so they didn't have to choose between Texas and Bama. But yeah, it's unfortunate, and I just think that there's a reason you scheduled the games and win the games, and Florida State did all they could.
There's no reason to schedule and win the games anymore. You're telling me a Power 5 team can go 13-0 and they still can't get in? Why schedule and play them? Why, Mark?
So we have finally hit a point, Mike. It's taken 10 years now, but I've made this point a zillion times, but it never played out. So I don't know that it hit a lot of people. I have asked people when they've argued for the playoff in the process of the playoff, I've said, what can a team do to guarantee that they will make the playoff? And the answer is the obvious. They've said, well, if you're a Power 5 team and you go undefeated and win your conference championship, you're in the playoff. And I've said, no, that is not guaranteed. What if all 5 went undefeated and won their conference? One of them would get left out. So there's nothing you can do to guarantee. It's the only sport where there is nothing you can do to guarantee you will make the playoff. And we finally got to the point where there it is.
Okay. And if Texas and Alabama were 13-0, we're not having this conversation, because if it's 13-0, Michigan, 13-0 Washington, 13-0 Texas, 13-0 Bama, 13-0 Florida State, I think everybody is fine with 13-0 Florida State being on the outside looking in. They would be, of those 5, clearly, without doubt, I'm sorry, Florida State fans, they would be without question the weakest of the 5 undefeateds. I think this is pretty much a given. Having said that, though, I mean, I'm just tired of, people just saying 3 letters and automatically assuming that gets them in without, the results on the field actually mattering. That just bothers me. I mean, I'm at the point now where I hope Ohio State plays an SEC team, and I hope they beat the absolute snot out of them. I want Ohio State to play Georgia and beat them 70-3. And I don't like rooting for Ohio State, nor would any Florida, nor would any Michigan fan. But I just want Ohio State to just go out there and just destroy any SEC team. I want any non-SEC team to beat the absolute soul out of every SEC team until these guys get themselves a damn bit of humility and understand that they actually have to earn the right to get on the playoff field, and not just think, the SEC is a 3-letter cheat code for them to get in no matter what they do and no matter how bad they look doing it. I mean, if Alabama wants to don't get beat at home by double digits to Texas. And just schedule more Western frickin' Carolinas and more Chattanoogas and more Furmans and more Citadels, you sorry sons of bitch. I'm sorry. I'm really losing my cool over this, Mark. I'm trying.
You're
not
okay,
to.
Mike. Let it go.
This is just a crock. And I guess I'm glad I'm not a Florida State fan, because if I'm a Florida State fan, I would almost say, you know what, I don't want a New Year's 6 game. I want to just decline anything. Say, hang a banner saying we're the 2023 national champions, and if you don't like it, go piss. We're undefeated. We won every game we played. We're 13-0. We're the champs. You can't say otherwise, because we didn't get beat on the field.
They do need to do that. I would do that if I was running the show there. Yes, we would hang a banner, 2023 national champions.
Yeah, I mean, you take about, I don't know, about $20 million to make for a New Year's 6 game now?
I don't know what it's up to. Is it that high?
It's high. I mean, I'd have to check, but I mean, you take a bit of financial hit today, but I mean, I would just take the hit just to kind of flip a bird to the committee.
That is a great thought right there. I love that. Yes, I haven't thought that far down the road, but yeah, they should do exactly that. But I don't know if they're contractually obligated. There used to be teams that opted out of bowl games all the time. It doesn't seem to happen anymore. I remember Ohio State, when Earl Bruce got fired, decided we're not going to the Sun Bowl. We're not going anywhere. Notre Dame opted out of a game not that long, within the last 20 years.
Yeah, and usually when they opt out, it's some piss ass December bowl that nobody cares and they're not going to get much money for. It's not the income that you would lose from bowing out of a New Year's Six game. So it's just, I guess it's just a matter of this is just a matter of principle now. I mean, everything comes down to money, but at this point in time, I don't know if the New Year's Six game pays so much that I would just put it aside and just and you might, call it a temper tantrum. You might think it's petty. I'd still do it.
And most of that money, that revenue goes to the conference anyway.
Oh, yeah. Because you'd actually get split between them.
Yeah. So big deal. I don't think it's that much money. I'll look it up, but let's say it's $15 million. It gets split up. It's $1 million per team in the ACC. You know what? Florida State's already pissed at the ACC anyway for not fighting for them and not paying them enough money and all that. They should just say exactly that. We're not playing.
Yeah, I just honestly wish that the committee did the right thing and didn't cave into pressure. And the idea of I'm at the point now where I'm trying my hardest not to go into full conspiracy nut things about maybe doing a little bit of an FBI search on Sankey to see if he's had a little bit of a contact, maybe he's getting a little bit of a kickback or something, because this reeks. This really seems off. It seems sketchy. I'm trying not to be that guy, but it's making it really hard.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of the rhetoric that started to surround some of these games late last night started to give us the indication of where this was going. Look at they're showing the Florida State team right now reacting to the result, and you could imagine what it is. They're just like stunned. They're looking around. They just can't believe it.
I don't blame them one bit.
Yeah, I don't blame them either.
I mean, they're basically saying, we did everything right and we're still being kept out of the dance. What more can we do? I mean, they had an out of conference game, with two SEC teams, one of them ranked. I mean, what more can they do? I mean, do they just start, putting bubble wrap around Jordan Travis and everybody that might give a damn about that team? I mean, it's.
It's a great comparison here, Mike. Florida State's win against LSU at a neutral site was more impressive than Bama's was at home against LSU.
Yeah. I mean, by all weights and measures, I mean, beating two SEC teams. I mean, and honestly, Florida State. I mean, I ranked on Florida State, because they were a penalty away from losing at Boston College. So there's that. But
they were a penalty from having to punt to give Boston College the ball.
Well, it was a Boston College. I mean, it was a very, very feasible.
Yes, but understand what you're saying there. There's a difference between they were a penalty away from losing versus if they would have not gotten that penalty on a face mask from Boston College when they were running out the clock, they would have had to punt, and Boston College would have had to drive the field and kick a field goal to win the game. So that's okay. Just clarifying that.
Well, that was a game where, it wasn't some, 13-10 slugfest. They were both, getting their pound of flesh on offense. But I mean, like I said, I sit there, I hate the fact that Georgia, I think Georgia was number one, because the whole, like, I'm a big Ric Flair guy being Michigan, be the man, you got to beat the man. But, Georgia, for all the talk about Alabama struggling against Auburn, Georgia struggled against Auburn too. They were tied halfway through the fourth quarter. They beat South Carolina in Athens by 10. And Alabama, God knows, if they don't pull off fourth in a country mile, they lose to Auburn. They scored 17 points against South Florida. I mean, what are we doing here? In fact, what was it, like a 3-point win against like 4-win Arkansas or something?
Yep.
What are we doing here, Mark?
Yeah. They've got a ton of these just awful performances. And with Jalen Milroe rolling, this isn't Jalen Milroe in September. This is Jalen Milroe once he started firing TD passes and running all over the place for 100 yards. They barely hung on against Arkansas, barely at home against an awful football team that lost to BYU, and you could run through the teams that Arkansas lost to. And then, yes, this Auburn. If Auburn just plays some type of prevent defense, I've got my own theory about that would almost ensure a victory. They lose that game. Yeah, it's really pathetic. It is pathetic.
Yeah, I don't know what I guess now that it's going to 12 teams, it's maybe the committee just want to go out with a bang or something, because now, I mean,
yeah,
to not make a 12-team playoff, if you're the 13th team, you can shut up.
Yeah, so next year, we're going to have legitimate arguments. They're going to be, because there's going to be a team at 12, and then there's going to be like 3 or 4 teams that we could argue have. But yeah, shut up. You're 9-3.
Yeah.
You could have done a whole lot more. So it's going to be much different, but it can be argued. It's just like the NCAA men's basketball tournament, where you can say, okay, these other teams have a resume and they have an argument to be in at 68 or whatever.
I don't have any sympathy for, a first 4 out bubble team saying, we can't make
don't go 19-12. Win a few more games. But so it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be similar to that, but there is going to be an argument where we're going to have teams that make it. Shoot, Mike, I've gone through the last 15 years and applied the 12-team playoff, and they're going to have heck of decisions to make. Now, again, they're not going to be as crucial because, yes, those teams need to just play better and win more games, but they're going to have we could apply it to this year. We'll have to do that and see, okay, what kind of logjam of teams are they going to have to decide between? It's going to be, we'll go through that at some point, but this is all about Florida State today. And
And I would hope that, as an Ohio State guy, you would just kind of summon your 2014 and say, okay, so Ohio State, they don't have their starting quarterback. Boo, out, get them out. There ain't no way Cardale can win a national championship.
Well, to be fair, there's a difference there.
There is, but
you know what the difference is, Mike?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I'm trying to make a point.
They proved it. Both teams had the opportunity to prove what they would look like. And Florida State, unfortunately, they get their second string quarterback hurt. So he can't even have that opportunity to say, bam, I'm improving from the last game to this ACC championship game. Then they got to go to the third string guy. But yeah, Ohio State had that ability to, they had that one audition and they came through in flying colors.
Well, I mean, it's not like Rodemaker broke his leg too. He was out for concussion protocol. He would be back for the playoffs.
Yes, he would.
So, I mean, it wouldn't even be a third string issue. It'd be a second string issue.
Yes. But unfortunately, they would have a better argument if he would have lit up Florida. I'm not saying they made the right decision. I'm still saying they made the wrong decision. I'm just bringing to light they're making an evaluation. They got it right there. It's right in the guidelines about assessing injuries. So it's not like they made this up.
Okay, but it just seems like that they just throw that in there as, kind of a backdoor excuse thing.
Well, isn't that an NCAA men's basketball criteria too? They can take injuries into consideration.
Well, you also have to figure that, one injury, on a team of what they get about 100, 110, 115 guys, that's a lot more impactful than, on a basketball where there's only 5 people on the floor. So, I mean, one injury in basketball, it's kind of like in the NBA. The NBA is a superstar driven league because, there's fewer guys on the court. So one guy can make the difference. In football, one guy can make a difference, but it's still diluted amongst a lot of people on the field. So it prevents it from, one team going from, one football player away from being a national championship to being an 8-4 team. That doesn't happen. I mean, and if you we're talking about like transcendent guys, we're talking like, the Cam Newtons of the world, which don't come along, but, every couple decades.
Yeah, but it is Jordan Travis, and he is a top 5 quarterback in college football versus, it'd be more sketchy if we were looking at, okay, this was their best defensive tackle. Okay, that's going to hurt them, but I'm just telling you what the criteria, it's already in writing, it's already there. So it's not like they made it up. It's been there since they started, since day one.
Is Rodemaker is he a walk-on or is he a 2-star? I mean,
no. He's a 4-star.
I mean, they're just making it sound like, Rodemaker is just, 200 pounds of stat crap. I mean, I'd like to find out a little bit more about him. I mean, they only played 3 games.
He only played 1 full game. Jordan Travis got hurt the week before against North Alabama early in the game.
Well, yeah, he played. Yeah, it was the first quarter of that game. So that and so Louisville the 3rd game. So we played almost 3 games.
Yes,
is my math right?
Well, he didn't play against Louisville.
Oh yeah. Okay, so 2 games. So,
yeah, he played 2 games.
Yeah, I forgot he was out for.
Actually, he played a game last September. That was a meaningful game. Jordan Travis got hurt in the first half. He came in against Louisville on a Friday night, and they were losing, and he played really well and brought him back to win against Louisville.
So his only other game was a come from behind victory.
Yeah, against a pretty good team.
Oh, what a sack of crap! They can't win with that. I'm
right there with you, Mike. I'm just playing devil's advocate on a few points just to clarify some things that you're saying, but I'm right there with you. It's garbage.
Yeah. Like I say, I'm just glad that, like I say, if it's a choice between playing Texas and playing Bama, I will take Bama all day. Their offensive line is crap. Milroe gets dropped constantly. Michigan's going to drop him like 3rd period French. Their secondary, I think our secondary is better. But Beck should have been intercepted 4 times yesterday. He was hitting McKinstry and all these other defensive backs in the hands, and they were dropping these. There were 4 that hit defensive backs in the damn hands, and they dropped them. So Bama can miss me with all this. We have this great secondary crap. Piss off. They're often, I want to see Will Johnson lock Jermaine Burton up. I want to see some pressure on Jalen Milroe, put him on his back where he belongs. And I want Bama. And then, let Washington and Texas kind of duke it out, because those 2 teams worry me more than Texas. So at least there's that sort of consolation for me. I really wanted the SEC to get themselves a slice of humility here. And
it should be a heck of a game.
I would, I'm not going to sit there and say it's going to be 35-3, but I like our chances against Bama a lot more than I do against Washington or Texas. So I guess, there's that. Okay.
Got a month to talk about it and break it down and figure out who's going to win. But you're committed, of course. I don't know if you can see the comment on the screen. We got a contribution there from Tide Guy, who says, I pay $25.5 million on to get Bama in to ruin Mike Fort's day.
Don't make me come down to Mexico, Jeff. I will find you. I'm gonna go cool off somewhere. Maybe that, the next time, when I called, later on in the week, my cooler head will prevail. This was just an absolute need to rant. I'm sorry.
Well, you may calm down just a bit, but your position's not going to change, nor will I. So that's what it is. And as John is letting us know, it's an invitational, and it's also been the Bama invitational. If there's any way to fit that team in, they're going to get fit in, just like they did in 2017.
Well, yes. I thought after last year, whenever Saban, started, stumping at our halftime for Alabama to get in. I thought if there was any time that the committee would actually take it as the true Alabama Invitational, it'd have been there. I mean, they wouldn't have deserved it, but if that would have been in, that would have then today wouldn't have been a surprise, because then we know it would have definitely been the Alabama Invitational. I thought that maybe last year them keeping Alabama out, which they should have, was kind of a break to common sense, but here we go again.
Okay, Mike, appreciate you being here.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Take care. All right, before we take the next call, let's understand something. ESPN, SEC, they're joined at the hip. They're together. Okay. Now you say, well, they are with the ACC as well, and Florida State's part of the ACC. Okay. When ESPN/ABC/Disney contracted with the SEC to build a network, when that network was launched, ESPN and Disney went full throttle to give that network the best studios, the best production elements. They built out documentaries for months that were just first rate, well done TV. Film, motion picture level documentaries, all of it. They poured their resources into the SEC, and they also poured it into pursuing cable outlets to make sure that the SEC was in as many homes as possible. And when the SEC network launched in 2014, I remember I was right there. Remember, I was standing outside the master control room when, boom, hit the air 2 weeks before, so we could run programming to make sure that there were no kinks, run programming for 2 weeks before the first opening game, South Carolina, Texas A&M. Okay. There's Nick Saban. He's on. He's got a smirk on his face. So what happened there was that when the SEC network launched, it was in as many homes, like right out of the gate. And this is unheard of, as ESPN2, that was a 30-year-old network. They got the SEC network. They got a package deal that all these cable outlets had to take the SEC network if it was going to take ESPN. So they ensured the success of the SEC network. The ACC network, sure, they poured money and resources. They wanted to succeed. But if you watch the network, you can tell by the production quality, it's nowhere close to the SEC network, number one. Number two, it was somewhat close to a failure when it launched. It was in about 25% of the homes that the SEC network was in when they launched the ACC network. So understand this, then we'll take the next call, that not having an SEC team in the playoff not only hurts ESPN/Disney from the standpoint of that relationship and pushing their major client, their highest priority client by far. Not only does it sever that in regards to not having it for the playoff game itself, which is the biggest event in the sport, but also from now, if the SEC would have been shut out today, from right this second until after the national championship game, the SEC network would have nothing to talk about. They would be talking about worthless bowl games. They'd be talking about games nobody cares about. They'd be talking about Missouri playing in the Liberty Bowl and Alabama playing in the Citrus, or they play in the Cotton Bowl, or whatever they would play in, all these games that nobody cared about. And the spectacle of college football, the Final Four, would be going on without the SEC, and the SEC network, the ratings would plummet for the next 6 weeks, would be horrendous. They'd probably get a spike on Feinbaum for about a week because people would be pissed off, and they would spike on that one show, but that wouldn't be nearly enough to offset all the programming they now have, because they can talk about Alabama being in the playoff for the next 6 weeks, leading through the national championship game if they advance. Their ratings would be completely irrelevant, that network, for the next 6 weeks. But that's not the way it is because they jammed Alabama into that spot. And there you go. There it is. We got Chris on the line. Chris, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Good. I was just going to tell you, I don't know if you showed, I was trying to reach you last night. I couldn't get through. I just was curious. I had this idea. It might not appeal to everybody. I don't expect that everything I come up with is going to make everybody happy, but I was thinking if you have a playoff and you have to limit it to 4, and if you have 4 undefeated teams, I really don't see what you have to, there's really not a whole lot left to argue about, in my opinion. I don't know, they put Texas and Alabama. I don't know. Those aren't the teams I probably would have put in there, but there is a silver lining. I already kind of told you about it. It's kind of like the old expression, there's more than one way to skin a cat. A committee can't really determine who they can try. It's kind of like the year that BYU won. They can say, well, they didn't play the best team or whatever, but that wasn't because of BYU. That was because of Washington not wanting to go there. So you really can't cook it to where a deserving team, you can try to like leave out a Liberty or in this case, I guess it's Florida State, but they're going to be represented to a bowl. And hopefully they'll be against, one of the teams I think that I probably, if I could have made the decision, and if it wasn't the 4 undefeated teams, I know that's not going to appeal to everybody, but I had Ohio State in the number 4 position, and I think I had Florida State number 3. Oh, and then I guess the one thing that maybe they did do right, they got the top 2 teams in the playoff mix there, I guess. So there's at least a fair chance that they might meet in the championship game. So, I mean, they didn't necessarily screw up. They just aren't necessarily following the right protocol, in my opinion. I don't know if you have that same idea. Maybe you don't, it's fine if you don't. But if you have 4 undefeated teams, Mark, I don't see much argument against not just having all 4 in there. Do you have the same? What do you think?
So let me get this straight. Your Final 4 is Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Ohio State?
Well, yeah.
That's what the proficiency rating says.
Well, by a comfortable margin too, Mark. It wasn't like, oh, it's really close between Ohio State. No, it really wasn't. Those were easily the 4 best teams. I mean, Ohio State would have gone in easily under if they had used it, which they obviously didn't. Yeah, it would have been Ohio State number 4.
Okay, so then your next point, I believe, is we got 4 undefeated teams in FBS, and those should be the 4 teams in.
Well, no, I'm just trying to save people some trouble if you want to know the truth. It's like we already kind of know unless you really like encores. I mean, we kind of know who's better between Michigan and Ohio. I mean, maybe you can say, well, we don't, but, I don't really like seeing rematches all that much, but I guess that's why we have options to consider, but I guess people want to see Michigan and Ohio State play for a second time or whatever. I guess that's fine. But yeah, if it had been up to me, I think I would have put the 4 undefeated teams in there for a number of reasons, really. First of all, it's probably the simplest way to do it. Secondly, if one of those teams, who knows, they might all 4 win. I don't know. They might not. They might all 4 lose too, I guess. But I mean, the way I go about it, I'm not even saying it's necessarily the best way, but I think if you have that opportunity there, it's kind of like a missed opportunity, in my opinion. Whether you agree with it or not, that's another issue altogether. But there's an opportunity that we will never know now, and it's going to be kind of like when Central Florida, maybe not the same, but kind of like in 2017. I don't think Central Florida necessarily belonged in the playoff, but
yeah,
if they could have put them in there, though, I mean, we would know.
So let's explain a few things to the chat. Let's explain a few things to the chat because they're not understanding you. Chris has a proficiency rating, and he believes, or he doesn't believe, this is the truth, the facts, that the proficiency rating says Michigan is the number 1 team in the country, Washington is 2, Florida State is 3, and Ohio State is 4. People are getting this confused because in the chat they're saying Ohio State's not undefeated, Ohio State's not undefeated. That's one thing. And then Chris is just saying his opinion would be, why not put all 4 undefeated teams in the playoff? That would exclude Ohio State, of course, and that would put Liberty in the other spot.
Right.
And you know what I'm going to say about Liberty.
Well, you already did. I saw it. You said they were number 60 or something, but that
Yeah.
doesn't really matter,
Well, I'm just ballparking. I have not worked it out. Here are two numbers for you, Chris. Do you realize that Liberty played the dead last worst schedule in college football this year? The worst one. So when we were having those discussions the last few weeks, I didn't know that, but I was just looking at it thinking, is there a worse schedule than this? And then I discovered the other day, no, they played the number 133 schedule in the country, the very worst schedule in the country.
Well,
that's number one. Number two, understand they didn't play a Power 5 team, period. And then number three, understand that, listen to this statistic. I'm watching these games yesterday and I'm thinking, okay, how did these group of 5 teams that are the championship teams, they are the very best.
Yeah, you already told
the conference championship participants. How did they play against the Power 5? You know what the number is? 2-11.
2-11. Yeah, you told me that already. I already know.
Okay.
Anyway, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Mark. I'm a little perturbed because anyway, I did look up the strength of schedule, and I'm not necessarily trying to argue with you, but it was 125 out of 133. But if you want to make it 133, I don't really care.
I'm sorry. I heard it was 133. I heard that from a few people, so I did not look that up myself.
I got my information from Sports Reference. It said 125. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm using the wrong information, but I got 125 out of 133. Yeah, there was somebody saying it was 133. I looked it up. I wanted to find out for myself. I said, okay, 133. Let me find out if that's true or not. I think it was 125. I mean, at some point, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's what, instead of the very last, it's 6 from the last or something. I mean, big deal. But,
yes.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't really worry about that much because, you know, you could have the worst schedule and still be a good team. So I don't necessarily think it really matters all that much, but whatever. If they want to look at it that way, that's fine.
So, Chris, we got the calls piling up, but I don't want to shortchange your time, but I just want to clarify. So you've told us what the proficiency rating is, and you've told us that the undefeated team should be in.
I got up really early this morning because I have to wait until like the results come through. And then I sent them what I thought was a pretty comprehensive list. And, you know, I did the same thing last year, and it seemed like the 4 teams I maybe accidentally were the same 4 teams that they picked. So I thought Ohio State had a pretty good chance of getting in. But the thing is about it is the committee can't determine who the national championship is. They really can't. People think they can. It's like in 1984. Oh, we won't put BYU in the championship game and they won't be the national champion. Well, that's not how it works. You can still be the national champion.
It's a
and not
completely different system today than it was in 1984. No, really they can determine who's playing for the national championship. Really, they just did.
Really. No, not really.
Yes. They select the 4 teams that play.
My point is, if you put number 4 Ohio State against or whoever, I don't know if it's going to be Florida State, but let's just pretend it is because I don't really know. Maybe you already know. I don't. I mean, that's a chance for Florida State to show that they're at least the number 4 team, if not better. So it's glass half empty, glass half full. I don't think it's not over. Liberty's going to play somebody decent.
Okay.
Find out how good these
That's
teams
in your world, Chris. Understand your world is separate from the world.
What do you mean by that, Mark? I don't really appreciate that.
That you are going to play a national championship in your head with Liberty, but nobody else is playing that game. Liberty is going to be subjected to a bowl game, and they had a great season. I give it up for those athletes. They're phenomenal to accomplish what they did, but they are not in the class of these other teams, and that's obvious to everyone. Therefore, they're not even considered.
I'm telling you, after Oregon lost, they fell behind percentage-wise. They fell like 2. Not very much. I mean, it's like within a hair's breadth of each other, but Oregon fell behind Liberty. So you tell me, if Oregon is losing and not losing by a large margin to Washington, I think Liberty could probably hold their own.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say about
it. They can't hold their own. That's all there is to it. All right, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. Call back anytime.
I appreciate it, Mark. Bye.
Thank you. All right. See, this is the conversation I will have on occasion, certainly many occasions at other times, but the information's too critical. We're at one of those days in college football that we all know what we want to talk about, and here we are to talk about these 4 or 5 teams. McD, what's going on?
Mark, I'm calling for a national boycott of the college football playoffs. That's where I'm at.
Okay. Hopefully you've got the hopefully you can do two things with that. Hopefully you've got the influence to make that impactful, number one. Number two, you can write me a check that's going to compensate for all the people that will not watch me because they're boycotting the playoff.
I mean, what do you want me to say, Mark? I mean, the ACC, I guess the ACC is not a Power 5 conference. I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, 13-0, Florida State, you go 13-0. You have a really good out conference win against a team with a guy that's probably going to win the Heisman. I mean, what do you want me to say? Like, if I'm a Florida State fan, I agree with one of the previous callers. I wouldn't opt out of a bowl game. I would sit there. I would have a banner saying 2023 national champs, and opt out of a bowl game and be 13-0. I mean, what a joke, Mark. I mean, and I said last night this was going to happen, that they're going to pit one of those SEC teams. I'll give the committee this. At least they put Georgia at 6. I mean, I thought it kind of surprised me a little bit they didn't put Florida State at 6. I mean, if you're going to keep them out, you might as well just put them at 6 if you're so in bed with the SEC. I mean, my God. I mean,
Yeah, but let's understand that the difference between 4 and 5 is all that matters. So after that, they can placate Florida State by saying, well, we're ranking you ahead of Georgia and, feel good about your number 5 ranking. So who knows? If it was a situation where they had to compare Georgia and Florida State, they probably would have done the same thing. Think about that, everyone. If this was Georgia and they just lost the SEC title game by 3 points, and there was exactly the same criteria, and we were comparing, and the committee was comparing Georgia and Florida State, don't be surprised, and we will never know, but understand that they may have selected, and I believe that they would have done the same thing with this Georgia team over Florida State. But since, and you're bringing me to a good point, actually, this is more fodder for a future video, that they just placed Florida State to say, hey, we truly considered them. They're number 5. We put them ahead of Georgia. This was a serious determination here.
No, it wasn't.
So that's what I'm telling you by them placing Florida State in front of Georgia. I'm telling you, if this was Georgia with the same exact credentials, they would have placed them ahead of Florida State.
I agree, because apparently the SEC I mean, it's the SEC, Big Ten. I guess the Pac-12 had an undefeated team. The Big 12, Texas, that's a big brand. I guess the ACC is not a Power 5 conference anymore. That is basically what this committee said. I mean, I'll give as much as I go after the AP poll because they have a bunch of people that don't watch the games, I'll give them credit. They had their final AP poll. Well, I guess their final AP poll was after the bowl games, but their AP poll that came out this morning had the top 4 teams correctly. I mean, I disagree. I would swap 3 and 4. They had Florida State at 4, Texas at 3, but I mean, I'll give them credit. I mean, and one point I forgot to make last night, Mark, and one of the reasons I think they put Alabama at 4 is because they think Florida State would get blown out by Michigan. Outside of last year, Mark, and Ohio State Clemson game, what have been the results of the college football semi-playoff games? What have been the results?
Oh, they've been ugly games,
Thank you.
unwatchable.
And I mean, would it surprise you if both of these games continue that trend of just blowouts?
It would surprise me if Michigan and Alabama is not a good game.
Okay.
The
I
other
mean,
one, I could see Texas blowing out Washington.
I could see that as well, but it wouldn't surprise me if Michigan beats Alabama something like 31-10. I mean, and the arguments being made, well, Florida State, the quarterback is injured, and they're on their 3rd string quarterback. The 2nd string quarterback would be back by the time the college football playoff game is played. He
Yes.
was out with a concussion. It wasn't like he was out with a hamstring, with a severe hamstring pull, or some severe injury. And it baffles me. I thought I thought it was lunacy last night that this was even being considered, but I guess we live in an era where the facts don't really matter. I mean, it's very disgusting. I will not be watching the college football playoffs, Mark. I will not be watching it, except if Washington, Texas, or Michigan makes the college football championship. If I will not watch it if Alabama's in the championship. I will not. It's not a real playoff. It's not a real playoff.
So
It
what can
really
we do
isn't.
to get your boycott out there?
I'm calling. I have a lot of availability Tuesday. I'm going to call the Paul Feinbaum show and call for it. I'm going to do
Oh,
that.
that would be great. Yeah.
So
Yes. I would throw
That's
you a minimum of some level of modicum amount of money if you started that phone call out with, I make this comment on the Voice of College Football all the time with Mark Rogers. And then you proceeded to say the rest of it.
I mean, I'll go on all these quote unquote YouTube shows and call for it. I mean, there needs to be a boycott. There really needs to be a boycott of the college football playoffs. This is not a playoff; it's an invitational. It's not serious. I mean, it's just a joke. It really is. Like, and I like what the first caller said. The Michigan fan, Florida State should say they should come out and say we are not going to accept a bowl invitation and hold a banner saying the 2023 national champs. That's exactly what they should do. And who cares if it pisses people off? I mean, this is the definition of getting screwed. It really is. It just really angers me. I mean, I feel like they don't even watch the games. I really don't. But it is what it is. I'm not watching the college football playoffs at all. I might watch the Washington Texas game because they deserve to be in the playoffs, but I'm not watching that Michigan Alabama game. I refuse to watch it. It's not a real game to me. It's an invitational game. So,
I like the boycott.
but I'm boycotting it. So. That's all I want. I told you last night, if Florida State was out, I was going to call your show and call for a boycott. So here I am. It really
Good stuff,
upsets me.
McD.
All right. I'm sure
Thanks,
you
man.
have a bunch of callers calling for the boycott.
The boycott is on, called on by McD Sports. I believe this figure that I just posted is correct. The ACC is 5-4 against the SEC. Run through that and correct it. I just added that up in my head very quickly. So that could be off by one, possibly. I do not believe that it is. Before we talk to our guy, David, I'm going to say this, that in 2017 and 2018, in much different circumstances, so understand where my head was at the time and would be if the same thing happened now, I called for UCF to say, you know what? We're hanging a banner. There's nothing else we can do but go undefeated. And then obviously beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl, ironically in the same stadium that the national championship was held in, that Georgia beat Auburn, and UCF obviously beat the team that beat both participants in the national championship game. So I said, and that was a different mission. That was the mission to say you either include the group of five or you don't include the group of five. You either say, go play your own playoff, or you formally include them every year. You do one or the other. You can't placate them and make them feel good about putting them in rankings at number 13 and number 17, and that nobody cares about the rankings past 4. Doesn't matter. So in a sense, something was done about that here 7 or 8 years later. David, what's going on today?
First of all, I want to stipulate I'm taking off my NFL Sunday to call in Mark Rogers here.
Look at this.
Yeah, well, I'm like I say, I'm almost as big an NFL guy. Well, probably a bigger NFL guy than I am a college guy.
Yeah.
Not to mention,
after situations like this, you should be. Who are we watching right now?
I got the Steelers game on against Arizona. It's actually 3-0 Pittsburgh right now in the first quarter.
Do
Probably
you
on
watch
its.
the red zone?
Oh, you watch the red zone?
Yeah, I'm a big
Oh,
red zone guy.
I was a big red zone guy too. I actually have a local establishment that I go to that has the ticket for the 4 o'clock games, which I will be partaking in later because the Browns will be playing the Rams. So we'll see if the Joe Flacco era will bear some fruit today. So I have my doubts. I want to get to it, Mark. First of all, I'm not surprised by this at all. I will say, and I did stipulate in the chat, I actually think the team up north can beat Alabama. I mean, I don't think this is your older brother's Alabama team. So I don't come to troll today. I actually think they've got a legitimate shot, although I do think this is a much, much different Alabama team than it was early in the year. And I do have to say, I mean, Mark, once you saw Georgia at 6 on that line, didn't you just know?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you had to know.
Yeah.
Once you saw Georgia, well, I tell you what, even once you saw Texas at 3 on that line,
Yes.
because you're gonna say, what are you gonna say at that point? Well, they've got the best loss, and then they've got the best win. You know what I mean? So, I mean, at that point, and how much, Mark? Too. I mean, I know this. The SEC chant's going to be going on. We'll have Darrell on to do all that. That's his
He's
bag.
coming up.
No, I'm sure. But in any case, how much of this just speaks totally poorly of the ACC and where it's at right now? I mean, come on, boy. And to be fair, as I put in the chat, a lot of Big Ten people have kicked on the ACC for being, bad. And this isn't Clemson anymore. Clemson isn't Clemson anymore. And by the way, Florida State probably could have lost that game with Travis. We talked about that game. I mean, just bottom line, I mean, how negatively does that speak of their conference?
Well, it does. It puts them in the ranks of the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 being left out from 2016 all the way up until today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Pac-12 never had a team that had a legitimate, they always played themselves out of it by losing a second game. But this is a team that's undefeated. So, it trumps all of those Pac-12 examples.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would say is, I mean, and obviously, I mean, the Mark Rogers top 25, that makes sense. You put a lot of emphasis on who you play, who you beat, and all of that. I mean, 55-5 on the SOS mark. I mean, that's a fairly big gap. I mean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I understand that it is, but I think that if we're going to get down to a football analysis of these teams on the field, if we're going to take the actual results off the scoreboard and start to then again, I think Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan are the 4 best teams in the country. So
Yeah.
I can make and some people in the chat are saying, Ohio State wasn't even in the conversation, not even in the discussion. Well, I realize that, but why can't you think a little broader past what you're force fed by other people to think? Can't we think based on the facts and the results and the metrics on the field?
Well, I mean, and this comes back to the conversation, excuse me, the conversation we had the other night when we said, do you want the 4 best teams or do you go with 4 deserved teams? And that's the question, because that doesn't, I mean, one would say if you want the best games, you get the best teams to play each other.
Yeah. 2 years ago, we had a situation where Cincinnati was undefeated.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame was 11-1. We had a Baylor conference champion at 11-2. So the same stretch could have been made to say, this Cincinnati team, well and good, great, you're 13-0, but your 13-0 doesn't count to the degree that these other legitimate teams that played legitimate schedules and strung out of conference games because you played one decent opponent, good opponent, Notre Dame, and you played in a weak conference and had like the 95th schedule in the country, we're leaving you out. I don't know why they didn't make the same move then.
Right. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't there a lot of like 2-loss teams that year, Mark?
Yes.
I mean, I think that because to be fair, that's the one thing, and they've had a couple chances to do that on the 2-loss scale. You thought they should have gone both ways on the 2-loss teams in 16 and 17, and probably would have with Auburn in 17 had they have gotten one, beaten
Yeah.
Georgia twice.
Oh, they
But
would have. Yeah.
well, they'd have had right. But I mean, that's one they've not put their hand on that stove in 10 years. So, you
Well,
know.
yeah, 6. 2017, they would have had to choose
Yeah.
Auburn.
Yeah, they would
'Cause
have.
they were number 2 or I think they were number 2 in the country with 2 losses.
Yeah, but I mean, that schedule was like, I mean, but then you're back to strength of schedule because they had to play Georgia twice, they had to play Alabama, and they played Clemson early in the year. I mean, that was like, I mean, talk about running the gauntlet. That's like playing
Yeah.
the NFL every week.
Yes.
So
they were going to take it. So I don't want to hear this. We don't select 2-loss teams.
right. Well, okay. Okay, that was your one opportunity in 10 years. And now you said it should have happened also in 17 because you would have picked Ohio State
I would have
over.
picked Ohio State in 17, and I think they were number 5.
Right.
So
They were.
that shows that under other circumstances, they would select a 2-loss team.
Right. And to show your consistency, to be fair, in 16, you would have picked Penn State over Ohio State.
Yes. Yes.
So let's, in all fairness here.
For those people that think I'm a homer, yes.
No, well,
I'm on record. There are videos with me ranting and raving about
Right.
Penn State got ripped off in 2016.
Yeah, like everything out there, folks, we've got the receipts on that one. We can show you them. So to show you that Mark's not biased. In any case, I will say, by the way, I tend to agree that those might be the 4 best teams. Although I will say, are we underrating Texas a little bit, Mark? I mean, could they be the 5th best team?
Oh, I'm not underrating them. I've said a zillion times here in the last like 3 or 4 days when people have brought this to me that if somebody wanted to supplant one of those teams, probably Ohio State with Texas, I would not argue that vehemently.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this. I mean, I think that. I mean, obviously, you're seeing a different Texas team with yours. I mean, I tried to watch that first half the other day, Mark, and wow, I think every Ohio State fan's wondering, obviously, the obvious situation. I mean, what would the offense look like with with yours at quarterback?
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, by the way, you do know his nickname is Honda McCord, right, Mark? You've heard that before.
I've heard that on here. I see it all over the place. Used to use it myself.
Yeah, it's not used. It's kind of like how Big Game Bob used to be used. It's kind of as a divisive kind of. And
depending on your Big Bob selection, Robert Ory got all sorts of respect for.
Well, we're talking college football, Mark. I was talking Big Game Bob Stoops.
Yes.
So, yeah. I mean, as one of my Ohio State fans in the chat says, a Honda Accord is actually reliable. And owning that vehicle, I can stipulate that.
Yes, I've got one myself currently.
That's right.
But I wanted to make a comment there. Yeah, I don't get the whole Bob Stoops thing. The guy won a zillion big games. So anyway.
Yeah, well, he lost a lot, but yeah, I get that. He did win some big games too. I don't know why they went that way on that. But overall thoughts on these 2 games, Mark, just real quick before I let you go. What do you think? You excited?
I think that the 1-4 matchup, stellar. It's going to be a great game. Michigan chasing around Jalen Milroe. Sign me up to watch that. Can JJ McCarthy? He's going to have to be better than he was against. He was really good against Ohio State. He was lousy against Maryland, and he missed a lot of throws last night. He's going to have to be much better. And let's see if Michigan's got the kind of speed that they can show against a top line SEC team, because when Michigan goes national, we know that has been catastrophic for a long time.
Well, the one thing I'm interested to see, the team up north running game is not what it's been the last couple years.
No.
And that's the one thing that's kind of held me back from saying that they could be the best team in the country this year. Because I think JJ is played at a higher level. It's just I I have not seen that same run game that I've seen the last couple years, which was another reason that I thought we had hope to win that game, and we did. Was I didn't think the running game was as dominant. I actually think Texas Washington is going to be really fun, Mark. I think that I think that's going to be a good one. Texas, actually, the reason that I'm kind of thinking Texas is as good as they are, they look like a Big 12 team that can finally play some defense.
Yeah, they got a great rush defense. I think that as if they get a pass rush on Penix, I
Yeah.
could see that being a rout.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Their D line's got some talent on it, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Their D line, Washington, I don't believe will be able to run the football on them. And therefore, yeah, if they can put heat on Penix, let's understand, we've thought that there were great semifinal matchups in the past, and one, if not both of them, turned out to be routes.
Right.
Michigan, Bama, that would surprise me, a route either way, but
Mhm.
that game would not surprise me. Texas wins 41-20.
Really? So, I mean, if it's a blowout either way, it's obviously going the Texas direction, you think, in that game. Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, I tell you, by the way, two good offensive schemers in that game, Mark, in DeBoer and Sark. Be interesting to see the game plans. If there's anything, any game that goes over it, I think it's that one. And I guess if there's any game that it goes under, one would think it's Team Up North and Bama, right, Mark?
Yeah, and the only thing that causes me to fall short of being extra confident in Texas is that I'm not a big believer in Sark, and I'm not a big believer in, yes, that Big 12 really tested their mettle, and this is a first-time playoff team, so they're not battle-tested from that standpoint. If this was coached by Saban or Kirby Smart, or if this was a Georgia or Alabama team, even if this was Ohio State with fully loaded C.J. Stroud and like C.J. Stroud with this defense, they're beating Washington by 4 scores. Forget it.
They're beating a lot of people by multiple scores if C.J. Stroud decided to stay in college. But that's one can dare to dream. Well, I unlike McD, I will not be boycotting the college football playoff or any other playoff games. Interesting to see where the Buckeyes go. Probably a bowl game where they should basically try to play it like a spring game, and a lot of players will sit. But I digress on that one.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, I mean, play your younger guys and get ready for next year.
Yeah.
So, well, one thing I will never be boycotting is Mark Rogers, voice of college football. That's for sure, my friend.
I appreciate that, David.
You take care of yourself.
Good one.
Yep.
See you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's keep it rolling. We got folks showing up, so we appreciate you. And yes, it's the Florida State Bama debate. Basically, that's what it comes down to. We thought we were going to have at one point a Bama-Texas debate before the weekend started. The real MVP's here. Hello, sir.
Oh, Mark. This has been a fabulous, a fantastic hour and a half, Mark. I mean, what can I say? Mark? I got it right. The top 4 teams that the playoff committee would select. And you know who I would like to thank, Mark? I would actually like to thank the Voice of College Football communities. They did their playoff poll last year. I would like to thank those people, those voters. I would like to call them all out. They set the precedent last year. Do you know who they left out of a 12-team playoff, not a 14 playoff? Do you know who they left out a 12-team playoff last year?
Wait a minute. They didn't leave out Alabama.
No, they did not leave out Alabama.
They left out LSU.
No, they left out Tennessee last year.
Tennessee. Yeah, well, that was stupid.
Do you know why they said they left out Tennessee?
Because they had a quarterback hurt.
Oh, they had what, Mark? Can you repeat that to all of them?
They had an injured quarterback.
And why is Florida State left out this year?
They have an injured quarterback.
Oh, so all those people I see them saying, oh, this is a travesty for Florida State. Yet last year, when you had the power, you voted out an SEC team because they had a quarterback hurt. And they had better wins. They had a better resume than this Florida State team, despite having the loss, I would argue. So I don't want to hear anything from those group of people. that voted Tennessee out.
Well, I'd have to measure up those two teams to see if they truly had a better resume. I understand those wins against Bama and LSU were pretty impressive, but man, getting skull dragged by South Carolina didn't look too good. And Georgia threw them all over the field too, which there's no shame in that. But I get your point.
Yeah, and there was 12 spots or 10 spots basically because of the Power 5, and there's only 4 here. So they had 2.5 times the more spots basically, and they still couldn't find a team in because of an injured quarterback, Mark. So, I mean, what can I say? What can I say? Florida State, I'm sorry for you. Everybody who said Tennessee last year should have been ranked below Bama, in my opinion, has no right to complain. They just don't.
You know what some people are wanting to hear is your percentage chance of Michigan winning the national championship. Has that been updated?
Yes, it has been updated, Mark. 65% chance goes to the Alabama Crimson Tide. 15%, actually, 20% goes to Texas. 10% goes to Washington. 5% goes to Michigan. That's how I see it right now.
They've increased their percentage chance by 5 times. That's a massive leap.
I still think Georgia's better than Alabama overall, despite the result yesterday and the way the game looked. But I can't deny Alabama has the better all-time head coach. They're more talented, and they play a different style of football than I think Michigan's going to see all year. Michigan's weakness is the secondary, and the only type of pass Jalen Milroe can throw is the deep ball.
Michigan's weakness is the secondary?
I believe so. I believe
with that. I think they have the best set of cornerbacks in the country. Now their safeties.
Well, I was talking particularly about their safeties. I could see them getting torched at the safety position.
Yeah, they might.
And I could see Jalen Milroe. He's the most mobile quarterback Michigan's going to face all year, without a doubt. And it's hard to replicate what he does on the football field, Mark.
It is. And that was my last parting line to the previous caller was give me Michigan chasing Jalen Milroe all day. That's what I want to see, how that works out.
I mean, I could just see it where Jalen Milroe just runs around in circles, Michigan defenders falling in front of him, and he just runs it for like 40 yards. I mean, that's a possibility because Alabama's. I mean, did you see them dominate Georgia yesterday on the lines of scrimmage, Mark?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the most impressive performance, I would argue, a defensive and offensive line have looked all season to do what they did against that Georgia team. That's incredible. And can you imagine what they're going to do to Michigan? A Michigan team, when they make the playoffs, usually gets put on figure skates, Mark. Oh, my goodness. They might get pushed for a first down every play, Mark. You might be able to do a quarterback sneak and get 10 yards against them. Well, oh, my goodness.
We've got a month to talk about it, so I'm not going to ask you for a final score, but I know it's going to be a doozy. So you're going to shock a lot of people, or people that are familiar with your takes aren't going to be shocked, but once you put a score to this game, this matchup.
Right. All I will say to that, Mark, is how historically close are these semifinal games?
They're awful. We've got about 4 classics, and the rest of them are washouts.
And does the more talented team usually win these playoff games?
Oh, undoubtedly.
And does the team with the better head coach usually determine the outcome?
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
And I think all of those factors go into one direction, Mark. But in all seriousness, for the Florida State fans out there, I feel devastated for them. Like, there's nothing they could have done, Mark. There was nothing they could have done. And it's unfortunate that the moment that their season was basically over was a meaningless FCS game against North Alabama, Mark.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, it's a horrible thing because we're not going to get to see a team that did everything right, and even once their leader, their quarterback, got hurt, did everything right, but there's an obvious drop off. So there is do we do what's right for the sake of doing what's right, or do we look at this with real football perspective to just select what is reasonable? And that's what the committee did. And they said this team is nowhere close to what it was before.
Correct, Mark. Absolutely correct. And
Tate Rodemaker needed to play really well against Florida, and that team, Florida State, needed to take care of Florida. And I'm not, if anybody's just tuning in, I'm not saying that Florida State didn't get screwed and that I would have them in the playoff, but I'm just saying this is what the committee needed to see. They needed to see some version of Cardell Jones in Ohio State because they got one audition, third string quarterback, and they smoked Wisconsin, who's probably on the same level as the Louisville team that Florida State played last night, if not better. And Florida State looked atrocious on offense, like atrocious on offense. They scored one touchdown, and it's because they ran out of the Wildcat one play, and Lawrence Toafili ran 73 yards. That's the only reason they scored a touchdown, was because of a Wildcat quarterback situation. So we'll keep it moving here. Jabril is gone. We'll go to our next caller, Dr. C.
Hey, what's going on, Mark?
Not too much. What's up, man?
Hey, wow, what a day. I'm gonna have to say, I know you and I kind of feel the same way about who the best teams are, right? So it being Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas.
Yes.
If I was doing the 4 teams, I wouldn't have Washington there. I wouldn't have Florida State. So what the committee did today, I think was the right thing. Because if you watch that Florida State, Louisville game yesterday, it looked like Iowa playing Iowa. Both teams were horrible at offense, and their defense was very good. The defenses were playing very good, especially Florida State, very impressive.
Yep.
And it sounds like I'm taking a shot at them, but we saw Michigan play Iowa yesterday. That would have been your Florida State that with that third string quarterback. Did what's his name? The backup the backup for Florida State. What's his name?
Rodemaker.
Was there any chance that he was going to be able to play?
Yes. Yeah, he's going to be ready to play.
Yeah. That team. The team just isn't a top 4 team without their starter, right? I think if they go undefeated, and that would have been a case, but I think the right call was made. You feel different, though, correct? You think Florida State should have been?
Oh, they should be selected. They went undefeated. They're a Power 5 team. They scheduled, there's supposed to be some kind of incentive, or there's supposed to be brownie points given to teams that actually go out and try, unlike some other teams that we've seen. Michigan this year and last year not schedule anyone non-conference. Florida State went out there. Florida State beat an LSU team worse than Alabama did on its home field. You have that direct comparison. So yeah, Florida State should be in the Final Four. But do I think they're one of the 4 best teams? No. But how many times does that happen? I could almost every year I could tell you without doubt that team's not one of the 4 best, but they earned the spot. But that didn't change the committee's selection in the past. They still selected TCU, even though they clearly were not one of the 4 best teams. They still selected Cincinnati, even though they weren't one of the 4 best. They still selected Washington in 2016, not even close to being one of the 4 best. They still selected Michigan State in 2015. They weren't one of the 4 best. They still continue to do this, but they didn't do it this year.
Yeah, but I think, obviously the loss of the quarterback. I mean, if their starting quarterback was there and they had the exact same results, they would be in. Do you agree?
Yeah, but I'm still applying the same criteria of them saying Florida State is not one of the 4 best teams without their quarterback TCU is not one of the 4 best teams, period. Cincinnati's not one of the 4 best teams, period. And on and on. Those other examples I gave. Oklahoma in 2019, not one of the 4 best teams. Then they get slaughtered, and Cincinnati gets slaughtered, and all the examples I gave, those teams got slaughtered. So football people should have been able to tell that, and they probably did in that room. They just got outvoted.
Well, the ACC also hurt Florida State as well. You have a bad Boston College is not doing well. Clemson's down. Virginia Tech is a thing of the past as of recent. Syracuse is down. Duke, good team. Wake Forest is down. Pitt disappointed everyone. Miami is trying to rebuild. So
there's not to Alabama's Georgia, LSU, to Michigan's Ohio State, Penn State, there's nothing in the Big 12. The Big 12 might as well be the ACC. They're the same conference in terms of quality, but there's not in Washington has Oregon. There's not another team or 2 or 3 that you're going to say they're a top 10 team.
Now, if Florida State yesterday, which was an impossible task in many ways with a 3rd-string quarterback, would have won 38-14, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it was 16-8, or it was
16-6.
16-6. That was a terrible game. I watched the whole thing. It was really bad, and the announcers kept on saying, Jesse Palmer goes, you know what? Florida State needs to score another touchdown. They need to. He goes,
I heard him say that, and I understand his thought, but that's an idiotic statement to make, because that game is absolutely no different for anyone who's got half of a brain that doesn't just look at scores. And we're asking he's talking to the playoff committee when he's saying that. It doesn't matter what anybody else in America thinks. The only people he's talking to is the playoff committee. Well, if they are going to be fooled or duped or persuaded by a touchdown on the board in the last 50 seconds, then they're complete idiots and morons, and they should be kicked in the teeth if that's going to impact their decision, scoring a meaningless touchdown at the end of a game that has nothing to do with showing the quality of the team.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But I think he started saying it in the 3rd quarter because, as you can see, it was just a bunch of
I heard him say it, in the last 50 seconds of the game. Now, he's saying it,
I think he said it a couple of times earlier because he was like, he started having doubts in his head. It's like, and what I was thinking as well. And it was like, man, this game is really, really bad. It's a really bad showcase, because the committee's watching all these games. And you just saw Alabama, who I think we should be feeling. I'm feeling for Georgia. Georgia, I felt, was the best football team all season long, right? They lost to Alabama by 3 points.
I don't know that we should feel for them. I don't know how their situation's any different than Ohio State's. Ohio State lost to the number 1 team in the country on the road in a game. To compare, Georgia didn't play Alabama as well as Ohio State played Michigan in these ways. Number 1, they're playing in Atlanta. They're playing in their backyard. They get to play the SEC championship game in their backyard. So basically a semi-home game, but a neutral site game, versus Ohio State playing at a difficult place to play. And number 2, Ohio State had the ball driving down the field, made 2 enormous pass completions, put themselves in range to throw for a winning touchdown. Georgia had to score a touchdown with 3 minutes left to get within 3. They were down 10 and then could never get the ball back. So they never were in a position to win the game.
Yeah. But on the other side of that, Georgia had to play an additional game that Ohio State.
Yes, absolutely. They did
not have to play. So
I
mean, we're never going to make anyone happy, but I think, what was it? Next year, with 12, a lot of this, there'll be some controversy, but I think the only thing to address with that, I always felt 8 was the right number. Do you think 8 was the right number?
Yes, I like 8.
8, yeah.
I don't mind having 12 if we could get around one thing, but the math doesn't work. You have to have buys, and buys are not fair. I don't think. Well, I think that they, in a sense, now with the implosion of the Pac-12, it can be fair, because when it was first devised, I thought, well, the committee's power has shifted from making the actual selections to their power now comes with who they're selecting to be the 4 teams that have the buys, the 4 conference champions. But now with only 4 conferences, that's going to pretty much fill out itself. And I think that that's, I've given a zillion examples through the years as to why the committee would have had a difficult time and not been able to justify selecting which 4 teams got buys. But now that there's only 4 major conferences, that's done for them. So I think that that's much more legitimate than it was originally.
Actually, that's an excellent point. I had forgot. I was still thinking of the Pac-12 and whatnot, but that's an excellent point. Yeah, so can't wait for these games to be played. I do think Alabama's will beat Michigan. And Texas, it's going to be Texas Alabama final again. And I think it's going to be I don't think Washington. Do you think Washington has a chance of beating Texas?
Oh, of course they've got a chance. I thought Iowa had a chance of beating Michigan. Anytime 2 good teams get on the same field, there's a chance.
Right.
I think they got a really good chance.
Percentage-wise, if you had to guess.
Oh, my thought may change with a little more analysis, but right out of the gate, I'd go 35%.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What about the I know I'm putting you on the spot and whatnot, Alabama, Michigan?
Well, I'm going to take myself off the spot by saying 50-50.
Okay. You're a pro, Mark. All right. Hey, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for taking my call. What a day to be a Bama fan, right? And unfortunately, this for Florida State today, they're going to mark December 3rd as one of the worst days of Florida State football history, unfortunately.
Yep. Dr. C, always good to hear from you.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to say I'm a USC Arkansas fan, but I'm going to say roll tide. All right. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
All right. I love this comment right here. So this moron writes this, Mark, you're a clown, but where are you? Where are you, you idiot? So call and let's discuss whatever your problem is. I've said like 58 times during the last hour and 51 minutes that Florida State should be in the playoff. So you're a moron, but call the show and we can expose your idiocy. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got
I'm on. Hey, what's up?
Our Michigan man. What's going on?
What's up, man? Let me start. I'm gonna talk about the match. I'm gonna talk about my opinion on the FSU thing.
Okay, we didn't hear much of any of that, but anyway, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We couldn't that first sentence.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm gonna talk about the matchup, and then I'm gonna talk about my opinion on the FSU thing.
Yep.
So I think this is the worst possible matchup Michigan could have had. You agree?
The worst possible one. Well, with Jalen Milroe's skills, yeah, him running around, and he's a physical runner too. Yeah, I don't like that part of it.
It's not even that. I think, look, Ohio State's probably the best overall defense we would have played, but it's not the worst matchup. I think the front seven of Alabama is a worse matchup than overall what Ohio State's defense was.
So you really like Alabama's secondary?
The thing is, here's my thing: is JJ going to have time to throw the ball?
Oh, I know. He didn't have that much time last night.
Yeah, exactly. And for all the talk about, Ohio State didn't have. They had issues with they were not the greatest pressure team all year. They didn't have a lot of sacks, whatnot. Alabama's front seven pressures the quarterback like hell. I mean, we saw that versus Georgia. Georgia has a elite pass blocking offensive line, and they pressured they pressured them pretty much after that first drive all game.
Yeah, so the thing that I said leading into this Big Ten championship game is that Iowa basically has, next to no chance. But if there's one thing that they do have, it's that I think that they can get pressure on J.J. McCarthy, which they did.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't think anyone's going to debate who got the better front seven, Iowa or Alabama.
Yeah, from a talent perspective, it's not close, but Iowa's pretty damn good. I think they got one of the best defenses in the country.
They do. I think one thing I didn't like what Georgia did in the Alabama game. I get it, but I think having 2 spies,
yeah,
really opened up the pass game because you're leaving. So what is that? 4. You're leaving opportunities in the back end when you're really they really should have 1 spy. Because when you have 2 spies, you're taking someone out of that secondary.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're really asking for
it's a risk. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't think Michigan would. It's going to be fascinating to see because that O line too is just huge. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared of the matchup. That's all. That's my bottom line here.
No, you're always fair. So that's a fair assessment there, and I think it's going to be a great game. This is the one that I think is going to be a better game than the other one.
Yeah, no doubt. And then FSU, man, you got to feel bad for them. I mean, you just got to feel bad for them. And I heard someone bring up a good point. If Alabama was 13-0, right, but their quarterback got injured, do you think in the same type of circumstances, do you think there's any chance the CFP leaves them out?
No. No way. No.
So it's just, I don't know, man. I think it's a black eye. I just think it's a black eye. Now, do I think Alabama's better? Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I do too.
But I just think you got to feel for them because they're probably thinking, why do we play this season? Why do we even play the games?
Yeah.
Well, what's the point?
Yeah.
we did our job.
They should have the committee go to Florida State and explain their decision to that team and say, we understand that you lifted weights all off season, worked out, ran, watched film every day, went to winter workouts, got up at 4:30 in the morning to go to early workouts. You did all these things, puking your guts out during August camp. You did all these things. Then you took on 13. You scheduled LSU, unlike some other teams. You scheduled a difficult non-conference game, and you actually beat LSU on a neutral site by more points than Alabama beat them at home. There's a comparison, but you didn't make the playoffs because your quarterback got hurt. Sorry.
Yeah, it's absurd. I just think it's absurd, man. Yeah, it's disappointing. Ain't too much. I think the Washington Texas game. I'll probably pick Texas, but you know what? I'm not gonna doubt that Washington offense either.
No, I understand that. If Texas was, let's say, coached by Kirby Smart or Nick Saban, and they had a history, and I don't mean 50-year history, I'm talking recent, like these players had proven it in this situation, I would have a lot more confidence in Texas, but I still think they're better.
Oh, 100%. And then one more thing before I go. I think actually Georgia would have been a better matchup for Michigan. I think Milroe is such a X factor that I can't gauge how Michigan's going to play him. At least Georgia, he's their quarterback, he's a great passer, but he's more prototypical. He's easy. You can game plan for that. You can game plan for that. You can't game plan for a guy like Milroe. You just can't.
No.
So, I mean, that's my final thoughts, man. Appreciate you taking time.
Hey, thank you, man. Yeah, look at what Jalen Milroe did inside 2 minutes in that game last night. He pulled the ball and he runs around the end for 30 yards against the most athletic defense in the country. That's the wild card portion of that. So Michigan's number one. They reached the playoff for a 3rd consecutive year, 3rd overall. Washington's number 2. They reach for the first time since 2016. That's their second appearance. And then we've got, let's see, Texas, their first visit to the College Football Invitational. That's what it is. That is highlighted more than any other time, more than at any time in the history of the college football playoff, is that it's an invitational. I'm taking notes right now for a video because anytime something hits me, I got it. That is something I've gotten away from calling it that I should have stuck with, because that was my label for this thing 9 years ago when it started in 2014, when it came out, the college football playoff, the 14 playoff. My initial reaction was, okay, how are they selecting these teams? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's an invitational. Okay. Yakov's here. Yakov, what's going on today?
Hi, Mark. Nice to speak with you.
Yeah, nice
Mark,
to see you. How's it going?
Yeah, Mark. Thank God, Mark. I think you'll find this interesting. And I'm happy to. I was waiting for, I would say, about an hour. I was at the gym on half hour on the treadmill and half hour on the bike, but they closed at 2 p.m. on Sunday, so I had to get off and call you from the car. Well, stay on and call you from the car instead. But I'm dedicated to the show. I'm dedicated to the show, Mark.
Thank you
Mark,
for that. That's very nice of you.
Mark, I wanted to say maybe 3 quick points here. I guess I'll call a storyline. The first one I want to tell you is he was hurt. He's in injury 2018, 2020. I remember watching Indiana, thinking, he has no future in football unless he's going to maybe be a kick returner in the NFL. And now he transfers to Washington. I think he's good last year too. He's going to be a Heisman finalist. They're in the Final Four, and he's going to be a top 5 pick. So I think that's of all the individual players, in NCAA football, I think his turnaround story might be the greatest in 2023.
Yeah, it's a great story. He stuck with it and stayed with it. Absolutely. He's a tremendous talent. I used to make comments about him back in 2019 and 2020 and say, yeah, this guy's an amazing quarterback, but he looks like a different guy every series. Like, he looks like a great player, future first round NFL selection. And then the next series, he looks like he's lost and has no idea where the ball's going and throws it in the first row like every other throw. Like, I used to say that all the time. He just was all over the place.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm happy for him. Another thing I think an interesting storyline here, Mark, is that the two teams playing in the 2 and 3 spots, particularly Texas. I didn't really like this realignment stuff. I have to admit, especially the Big 12. I didn't like seeing that change. But I think it's interesting. The team that started us off, because really it was more Texas and Oklahoma. And then Washington was not the initial team that started. That was obviously USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. They were, second. They were late coming to that. But I do think it's an interesting storyline that their last year in their respective conferences, as well as they are both going to be in the last champion of their leagues that are, one's over and one's totally different, and they both made it to the college football championship. I think that's a very interesting storyline there.
Yeah, it is. It is. It was cool watching in some ways, in some ways sad to watch the final Pac-12 championship. But those teams are moving on. Yeah,
I did feel bad about that. I'm old enough to remember the Pac-10, of course, and now they've lost luster than they had back in the day when they were playing the Big Ten. The road, so bad that conference is falling apart. Another thing I thought I would tell you, Mark, is obviously in 2015, but in 2017 and 2018, I was disappointed that Ohio State didn't make it. I was leaning toward they went those 2 years, but I don't know, for some reason, Mark, I actually feel, and I didn't think they were going to make it yesterday nor today when I picked them, even if I was on the selection committee, but for some reason, Mark, I like to consider myself a fair person, whatever that means. And I actually feel worse today than I did for my own team not making it in 2017. 2018, to a lesser extent, 2015, just with the way things fell out, and they lost head-to-head to Michigan State. I didn't go into that day thinking they had a chance to make it. But I actually, Mark, I feel worse today than I did then. Florida State, I think, I know it's brought this up, Mark, but I think in some way I couldn't look at. I want to look at the schedule, but I can't do it on my phone right now when I'm streaming on StreamYard. But did Louisville lose to Pitt the week after they lost to Notre Dame?
Yes.
After they beat Notre Dame. I think it's interesting that Pitt, I think, maybe played a big part in the situation. They lost to Pitt. They lost to Kentucky the week before. It just took a lot of luster off of that game. That's one thing I'll say. And it was Georgia. I also feel bad too that back-to-back champs, 12-0, and also in their championship game, Mark, of all the five, soon to be four Power 5 conferences, they had by far the most challenging title game. Michigan, they played a team with the score would have been the same if the second team Iowa offense had played out there.
Well, many would say the second team Iowa offense did play, just because the quarterback's hurt, the tight ends are hurt. Yeah. They had injuries all over the place.
They did, I guess, but they haven't shown anything all year on offense, so it's hard for me to think that if those guys were healthy, they all of a sudden, score more points than they did against Northwestern.
Yeah, I understand your point, but Cade McNamara, I think, is proven to be a more capable quarterback.
He's better. Yeah, and obviously that's cheering. I like Ohio State was cheering for Iowa, although really was mainly focused on the other game. And the Georgia thing, what bothers me is again, they lost. They had by far the toughest game there. I think Oregon would be second as far as that. Texas that wasn't really much of a game. Louisville not interested in as far as top quality. And the same with can't think of who else. Who Texas played. So I do feel bad for Georgia. I didn't think they should have been ahead. Obviously, can't be ahead of Alabama. They lost that game. But Mark, I think of all the 10 years now, this is the year that I think the 12-team playoff came a year late. We need 12. We needed the 12 teams this year. Of all the 10 years we had, the 12-team playoff came a year late. I really wanted to see Georgia and Florida State have a chance. I didn't think Ohio State deserved a top 4, but I'd like to see them have a chance. And I also would like to see Missouri have a nice run there. They played Georgia very tough at Georgia. I'd like to see them have a chance. I think it came a year late, I should say. One last thing I'll say, Mark. I know you think it's interesting, Mark. We're down on Ohio State, but this is actually, I believe, their worst finish in the playoff football. In the football playoff, they've never. Finished.
Oh yes,
I think
this is the worst. And it's funny because the distance between each one of these seeds has to be minuscule. So even though they dropped to number 7,
right? And
I get them dropping them to 7. I don't agree with it, but I get it. I understand it. I don't think it's ridiculous. But they're pretty close to 4 or 5. I just think that those rankings are so minuscule.
Yeah. So as much as I'm down, after the game last week, I think they're probably still one of the top 4 programs. I mean, they're recruiting their second. And it's not the time for me to put down Michigan, but their last year's class was 18. This year, I think they're 15 or 16. Obviously, I know what the elephant in the room is. What's going to be with the NCAA? I still think there's a lot of story left with that. So Ohio State's not the story today. It just happens to be I'm an Ohio State fan, and I still think the future is bright, Mark.
I'm with you. There's nothing wrong with the program. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be addressed in some places. But when I say wrong, there's nothing systemically wrong about the program. They're still churning out 11-win seasons like nobody else. And recruiting.
Hey, Mark, is there 4 better programs than Ohio State?
You'd have to put Georgia above them. Until a few weeks ago, nobody in the nation, few people were going to put Alabama, but perception changes quickly. So you'd have to say Georgia, Alabama, and Michigan.
Yeah, that's the only 3 I was going to say, Mark.
Yep.
Maybe not this year, but I'm saying overall. Yeah. And one last thing I'll say, Mark, I will give you my prediction. I'm thinking in 2011, after they lost to LSU, me and myself, I remember watching that game and cheering for LSU. I thought the era was over. When they lost that, I can't look at my phone. Remember they lost the home game at the beginning of the year to Mississippi. I think it was 2018.
You're talking about 17? Alabama.
Alabama, yes.
Yeah, they did.
They had the Land Sharks, and they were running. Mississippi was really good, and they were running around with
2014 and 15.
But what year was that?
2014 and 15.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I thought both those years as well that the era had changed. They made it in the playoffs. Well, the one against LSU was before the playoffs, but when they get into this number 4 seed, Mark, they're going to win the championship this year. Alabama's going to win the championship. They got in that 4 seed. He has time to prepare. They have the best players of any of those 4 teams. They're going to beat Michigan by somewhere between 10 and 14. Grind it out. They're going to play Texas, and I thought they were written off when I saw when they lost to Texas, when they had a terrible game against South Florida, and but Tuscaloosa is going to be title town again, and that's what I'm going to say right now, Mark.
All right, man. Well, appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mark. Enjoy
Thanks,
I'll listen to the rest of the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye, Mark.
All right. Let's address a couple comments here. So Porcher says, Mark, you should have seen your eyes light up. Well, these days, if you know anything about my situation, my eyes aren't really lighting up. Well, one of them in particular is I'm actually overdue I've been on here for 2 hours. That means I'm an hour overdue of putting more drops in my eyes because my eye's infected. But anyway, Mark, you should have seen your eyes light up when you realized that the playoff was an invitational. So I'm taking it, Porcher, that you were around 10 years ago. That's when I came to the realization. When the news came out, there's a college football playoff going to 4 teams, and it's going to be selected this way. That was the day that I said on here, this is an invitational. So I guess you're talking about my reaction 9 to 10 years ago. Guess that's when my eyes lighted up. I don't know. We'll have to pull that video because I said it about 48,000 times then and since then. Invitational. So I guess you were watching at that point. And we'll get to the calls after one other one. I forget who it was. They just posted, Mark, the men's basketball tournament's an invitational too. Yeah, it is. Completely different, though. Completely different. How so? I shouldn't have to explain this, but let's say there was an invitational with one team. One team made the invitational. Well, that committee obviously would hold all power because they'd be selecting the national champion. Okay, let's say if we expanded the invitational to 2 teams, just like the BCS. Well, that committee would have a lot of power because they'd only be selecting 2 teams to reach the championship, to play in the championship game. All right, let's say the invitational is 4 teams. That's still a lot of power to only select 4 out of 133. Okay? And I think we would all agree that these 4 teams generally have a shot to win the national championship. And even beyond this, there's probably 1, 2, or 3 teams, we could name them, that would have a shot at winning a national championship. But when you're selecting 68 teams, let's understand, I don't watch college basketball anymore. I have not for about 10 years. You could give me the data, the wins and the losses, and who's good in the standings in all the leagues, and the metrics of the various metrics, whatever they call it now. I don't even remember. In basketball, and without even watching a basketball game, I guarantee I could select like 60 of those 68, and they would be right in line with their selections. So basically what they're doing, they only have 2 purposes in terms of the selection committee in basketball: to select the bottom end of that, because the top 60 are givens. They're givens. Anybody with half a brain could make those selections. So they are self-selected. They're making about a bottom 8 selection. So they're selecting the teams that are going to lose in the first round, or may have a chance to pull off an upset. And then, as a whatever, a 13 against a 4, pull off an upset and get to the next round. That's what their job is, to select the bottom and then to seed them. There's where their power lies. Selecting the bottom of the tournament and then seeding the teams. That's their power. It's not selecting the top 60. Any moron could do that. The computer could do that. They're selecting what anybody else would select. They could just look at standings and records and strength of schedules. So there's a complete difference between the power that this committee holds in selecting all 4, the only 4, just 4, versus selecting 68. that, again, the first 60 are self-selected. And there's what, 20 some automatic bids, maybe more than that, like 25 to 30 that are. So that's not an invitational. Those are earned spots. So that's not an apt comparison between the selection committee and the selection committee for the playoff. All right. Erica's here today. Erica, how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. What's up?
Good. So I just want to say first, FSU got robbed. Not going to go into, I imagine other callers have talked to you about that already and whatever, but I just wanted to state that, and I think it's a load of garbage. The other thing I did want to ask is, I'm assuming you watched, or I know you watched the Iowa-Michigan game. I saw you were making comments on Twitter, so I'm sure you watched it.
Yep.
I wanted to know your thoughts on officiating last night.
Well, so let's go to the most impactful call of the entire game. And not just call, the entire, the one play that was most, it broke Iowa's back. And we know what that was. They were down 10-0. They had the ball. Deacon Hill throws an incomplete pass. He's hit from the backside and throws an incomplete pass. And it's ruled an incomplete pass on the field. But after the review and everything, Michigan's got the ball at the 4-yard line. Basically, it was a gift touchdown. And so now it goes from 10-0, a manageable score, to 17-0. And with Iowa's offense being what it is, game's over.
Right.
Okay, this is my thought about that. Throw the rule book out for a second and just say, as football fans watching a ton of football and watching much more football than I care to admit or should be proud of in my lifetime, that looks to me like a fumble, just watching the play. That does not look like that player should be given credit for attempting a pass. They have the ball cocked back in their arm, and it's boom. They're just blasted from the backside, and the ball goes flying. That, to me, looks like a fumble. However, we have something called a rule book. So if you go to the rule, even though I don't necessarily agree with the rule states that the ball, I would rewrite the rule myself to say the ball needs to leave the hand of the quarterback to be a pass, not that he is starting his motion. Well, you swing your arm when you run just because you could at any point shovel it forward and try to throw it to somebody doesn't make it not a fumble. So I think the rule's bad, but the rule is the rule. And the rule states that if the arm is going forward, then it's a pass, not a fumble. So point number one is that Iowa got screwed by the actual call. And obviously it was called an incomplete pass on the field. So Iowa was screwed in two ways. Number one, it's clearly based on the letter of the law. It was a forward pass. Number two, why in the world are they reversing a call that was made correctly on the field when you're supposed to have indisputable evidence otherwise to change a call on the field? So that was completely botched and completely robbed Iowa.
Yep. What did you think of the body slam that Deacon experienced?
That's typically called in today's football. That's in the rule book as well, that you do not. First of all, I would want to see it again in real time. So I think we asked these defensive players to do something that is humanly and physiologically impossible, and that's to pursue that quarterback as fast as you can, but in a split second be able to halt your momentum and not hit them. So we asked them to do something impossible. We used to give them a step and a half. It doesn't seem like that's done anymore. But on top of that, so I wouldn't necessarily have flagged unnecessary roughness as a late hit. I don't believe it was a late hit. However, he took Deacon Hill, and he threw him down, and he landed on him.
Yep.
See, that's another thing where when two players are colliding, especially the quarterback, let's say, is the target of the defensive player coming at him, that it's extremely hard if you're in the process of hitting the quarterback and he releases the ball, to not land on him. So that's another portion that I think is unreasonable, to ask a defensive player to shift his body weight while he's in full flight and land next to the quarterback. However, in this case, he initiated the launch to do nothing but land on him.
Mm-hmm.
And so it should have been called. Yes, that's an unnecessary roughness penalty. I don't think it's a late hit. I think
Right.
it's unnecessary roughness.
Yep.
Clearly. Yes.
And the best part about it, excuse me, was that I believe it was during the Nebraska game. Quinn Schulte on the defense was in the process of sacking or trying to sack the quarterback there. And he was finishing his play because he was already like midair when the play was called, and they penalized him for that, which they should not have done. That's called finishing the play. So
Yeah.
it's like these refs. I mean, and I'm not one to complain about refs. Like I've stated on this show, I've stated on Corey's show, that whole thing with Minnesota. Yeah, it was a bad call, but Iowa should not have been in that situation with the offense. And it's the same crap as yesterday. It's the same exact story again. These were bad calls, but Iowa should have been in a better offensive situation. That's no doubt.
Yeah, so both things can be true. The Big 12 game that kicked off at noon yesterday, Texas was clearly the better team. They blew Oklahoma State off the field, but Oklahoma State still got screwed like 3 times, horribly got just screwed by awful calls. Well, as soon as I make comments about them getting screwed, people are like, well, they're getting blown out anyway. It doesn't matter. And are you kidding me? Well, no, I'm not kidding you. The game should still be officiated correctly. Do I believe Iowa was going to beat Michigan? No. But the game would have been more competitive and would not have had the same score. Right. And we don't know. We really don't know what would have happened if Iowa was allowed to keep that football down 10-0. Shoot, they could still be playing, and Brian Ferentz could still be trying to figure out how to kick a field goal, how to get in range to score anything. But that's beside the point. The game still needs to be officiated correctly.
Right. I mean, most people knew it was a foregone conclusion that Michigan would win, including myself. I never claimed the contrary. I'm not that. I know everyone's a homer of their team, but I'm not that much of a homer. But I mean, 10 points for Iowa. Yeah, their offense is rough, but that's an over, especially when half the game is only over. That's something they can come back from still. If our defense scored and then we got a field goal, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, that could have tied it up. So the refs came in, did their thing, and played with something that, frankly, they didn't even need to play with because Michigan was going to win either way. So it's kind of dumb. But yeah, that's my standpoint on that. The other thing I wanted to say to all those people, and there were people in this chat before the Michigan-Iowa game who were saying, oh, Iowa's played no one. That's why their defense looked good. Bullshit. Okay? Bullshit. We might have lost last night, but our defense did a damn good job. Better than Ohio State did against Michigan. So I don't want to hear that narrative anymore. That's garbage. It's absolute garbage saying Iowa played no one, so their defense is not as good as advertised. Please.
Yeah, you're definitely right. You are definitely right. Iowa's defense, people, if they just looked at the final score, there's nothing to be ashamed of giving up 26 points, but they didn't even legitimately give up 26 points in that game. Yeah, the Iowa defense is exceptional.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all I had. Like I said, FSU got screwed. I guess people should not bother winning games anymore. Don't see the point. Why even play if you're undefeated and you don't get in because you have an injured quarterback? I mean, why bother playing games?
Yeah, they still played 2 games after the quarterback got injured, and they won them, plus an ACC championship. So I don't know what to tell you. That's just I would it would be great if the committee would be forced to go face the Florida State football team and explain their decision.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'd also say Mike brought up a really good point in the chat that Michigan is down one of their, I believe, offensive guards, yet they still got in.
Yeah, he's one of the best guards in the country.
Right. So my point, I'm not saying Michigan shouldn't be in there because they should. However, it's the same argument. Like, they have one of their best players injured. They're undefeated. They got in, deservedly got in. But FSU, who also is undefeated, had their quarterback injured. They don't deserve to get in. No, that's ridiculous. That just proves that this is about money. It's not about the game. It's not about the players. It's about the money. And that's disgusting.
Yes, and Florida State scheduled a game against LSU. These teams are encouraged to go out and schedule difficult non-conference games, and they scheduled LSU. What's ironic is obviously the comparisons between Alabama and Florida State, and they both played LSU, and Florida State had a more decisive win and did not get to play Florida State or LSU at home like Alabama did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all these things, I'd like to hear the logic of the committee. I didn't listen to the announcement, like, to be fully transparent. Didn't listen to the announcement, don't know what was said, how it was said, whatever. But I agree with you. Like, someone needs to go talk to Florida State's players and explain to them what they could have done differently. Because honestly, a quarterback getting injured, that should not be disqualifying grounds if you're undefeated. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
You know what who was it? David Greenshield said quarterback versus offensive lineman. Come on, that isn't close. Garbage. That is a garbage take. I am sorry. What this is they're letting Michigan in deservedly. Again, I will emphasize they deserve to be there. But if you're working the same logic across the board, okay, and you're saying that there are two teams here who are undefeated, one of them doesn't have a quarterback, and one of them is missing linemen, both of them should still go in. Like they both earned it. Why are we playing games if we're going to do it this way? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I don't know what your thoughts about the best teams in the country, but certainly I separate what I think and what my opinion is versus what I believe should the action should be, the selection should be. So I don't believe that Florida State's one of the four best teams, but I don't think that my opinion should factor into what the rightful selection is.
Yeah. I mean, they're undefeated. You can't argue with that stat. It's 13-0. That's it. Like, what's there to argue about? This is not an opinion thing. This is a numbers thing. You can't argue that they won 13 games.
Yeah.
And then you have a quarterback. I don't know if you saw their quarterback's post on Twitter, but he's apologizing for having gotten injured. He feels bad. We shouldn't be having that.
No.
We shouldn't be having that. It's unacceptable. Just like the NCAA is unacceptable with the numerous mistakes they've made this year and in the past with their rulings on crap. Like, anyway, that's my opinion on all of it. And again, David Greenshield, that's a crappy take. Sorry.
Great job out of you. Erica, thank you so much for calling.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We've got Jordan Travis going nuts today, which he should. It's totally understandable. Totally understandable. Like, on one hand, I think that we elevate these athletes way too much, but on the other hand, most of them seem to be pretty upstanding kind of guys, and they obviously work hard. That's the one thing that we can't argue. They work extremely hard. They basically have jobs. And I was going to pull up Jordan Travis's Twitter feed here. So he has put up, for example, these horrendous showings by Alabama against these teams. They, of course, lost to Texas by 10 points. It got outscored 21-8 in the fourth quarter. And yeah, they had their starting quarterback, Jalen Milroe, play that game. But Texas, it's not a situation where Texas missed. Then if Texas was left out, then we would have that debate. But yeah, Alabama, we're only 1 week removed from them just looking completely awful, marginal against a team that's the 50th to 60th best team in the country. Auburn, coming off their debacle against New Mexico State. The committee, let's face it, the committee has ties to ESPN, which has ties to the SEC. So I went through that explanation before, and most of you know what that is generally. I explained it a little bit deeper. Let's also understand that the committee, there was a comment made on one of our shows last week that the committee does not use objective criteria. And I only somewhat agreed with that. Here's the case. is that the committee uses objective criteria. They just changed the criteria. So they got a bag full of criteria. They got this bullet point conference championship. They got this bullet point record, this bullet point strength of record, this one strength of schedule. They've got head to head. They've got all these objective criterias, but they only use the ones that they need to use and ignore the ones that don't apply or make their selection look bad or unjustifies their selection. They ignore those and they only apply the ones that they need at that point. Jordan Travis, let's see, devastated, heartbroken, in so much disbelief right now. I wish my leg broke earlier in the season so y'all could see this team as much more than the quarterback. I thought results matter. 13-0, and this roster matches up across any team in those top 4 rankings. I am so sorry. Go Noles. Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad. All right. Next up, I'll probably get flagged for that one. Anyway. Next up, I probably just shot any revenue. All right. Anyway, let's go to the next call. We got Ben on the line.
Hey, Mark. How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah. How's it going?
Okay. Hey. Yeah, I'm really disappointed in that whole. I actually want to address Erica's comments before. I completely agree. Like we talked earlier last night, I completely agree with that call that you were bringing out about the one that they actually video reviewed. As far as the rest, I seen some bad calls in that game. I saw you could watch the first drive of I think it was the first play of the second quarter. You could see Mason Graham got held so bad that I thought it was like an obvious call. And then there was a time where JJ got thrown down as well, where he was trying to go to the ground. He got grabbed and they blew the whistle, and the guy kind of does like a over the shoulder toss and threw JJ to the ground, and that didn't get called. I thought there were some bad calls altogether in that game, but I agree with that one call being bad. So I just want to, I agree with that, Erica, and I just wanted to let her know that was, but I thought there was some bad calls on both sides. Not that it wasn't worse for Iowa. I thought it wasn't, there was some blown calls. So I just wanted to say that to Erica. The other thing is I'm so disappointed in this Florida thing that it's almost got me thinking about not watching college football anymore, even this year. And I'm a big Michigan fan, but it's just, it took the, it just kind of blows up any idea of this game not just being money. We're watching pro wrestling at this point. Almost, it's just like, to me, it really takes a lot out of the game. And I'm already sad to see that, as much as the 12 team playoff will take that kind of thing, might help with an issue like this. I'm sad to see the 12 team player, because the thing that I love most about college football is that every game matters. And now they're saying every game doesn't matter. And I think it's a shame. I think the playoff committee should be ashamed of themselves. It looked like they were when they were talking about it. And I couldn't even watch, and I couldn't listen to the people on ESPN try to justify Alabama being in there. It's ridiculous. And here's the thing. The SEC is always pumped up. I mean, we talked about it earlier. We talked about how Ohio State, and you brought up Ohio State being number one, and then they're number one until Georgia beats Missouri. And then all of a sudden they're number two, and then Michigan beats Ohio State and doesn't get that number one rank. That just doesn't make any sense. And it's really got me disappointed in college football, and I really don't. as a fan. And that one caller earlier I got on when he was talking about boycott. I mean, I agree with it. I mean, I'm seriously considering not watching the game the rest of the year. I don't know what to do, man. I think it's disappointing. And it's not about it's not about playing like for Michigan playing Alabama or whoever we play. I don't care about that at all. It's just I think it's unjust, and I think it ruins the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ben. Well, thanks for we already talked today, right?
No, I talked to you last night though.
Okay, it's all running together, I guess. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. I was thinking, didn't we talk to Ben before? Oh my goodness. Yeah, what more can I say at this point? I think I've said it all.
Yeah.
Concerning this. I get the decision. I just don't agree with the decision.
Yeah. I mean, there's some I just don't see. I just think you invalidate everything that college football stands for by doing this. And you might as well just put Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama in the playoffs and just be done with it. No, and not even that, because Texas could be a better team than Alabama. They already beat them once, but whatever. Well, Mark, thanks for taking my call. Who do you think's a better team? Do you think it's Alabama or Texas? How close? I mean, it's a close margin.
Oh,
right?
I think it's really close. Yeah, I would take Alabama, but I don't know. It's so close.
Who do you think's a better matchup for Michigan? I mean, who do you think was the worst matchup? Would you rather play as a Michigan, when you look at Michigan, would you rather play Texas or would you rather play Alabama?
The biggest difference, the most obvious difference between the two teams is Jalen Milroe and what he's able to do outside the pocket. So I think that's just a threat that, this guy's running for 100 yards against pretty good defenses in some games. I'm not saying he's doing this every week, but so he provides, when you got a guy that at any point can go 30 yards, 50 yards, that's one thing. And then at any point when it's 3rd and 9, you can cover up the receivers, but he can escape the pocket and pick up a first down and keep a drive alive. That's a huge factor.
Yeah. I'm wondering about his consistency though, as compared to Quinn Ewers.
He's not as good a thrower. That's not even close. No, Quinn Ewers is a better passing quarterback in terms of mid-range and short passes.
Yeah,
now, if you're going to have him chuck it down the field, Jalen Milroe can throw the ball. And I'm not talking about just how far can you throw a football where, we're at halftime and we're doing the Dr. Pepper and you can throw the ball, who's going to throw it 70. But I'm talking about accurately and on time and all that. He's a great deep ball thrower.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Mark. Well, I'm going to let you go. Hey, thanks for taking my call. And I don't know if I have the heart to get back on any more discussions, so I wanted to get on today. I do. I hope my heart changes later, but right now I'm really thoroughly disappointed in the results of that, and I just don't think it's fair to those kids.
What would have been funny? What would have been kind of funny and would have been some level of justification is if Alabama and Texas would have played in the first round, if they would have put them together in the first round, and let's say Texas just would have blown the doors off of them, and then we could all throw our hands up and say, see, they shouldn't even been in there. But yeah, that did not happen.
And the thing is, this is what I hope. Honestly, what I could hope for is that Florida, takes. I mean, I do understand like Florida not wanting to take a bowl now. I mean, I think that's I think that would be kind of a kind of thing that I would want to do. But I hope Florida goes in and beats whoever their bowl team is. And if in somebody other than Alabama wins the national championship, I mean, I want it to be Michigan, but anybody other than Alabama wins it, that would make me feel a little bit better, at least for Florida. And if Florida can have a case to say, hey, we deserve a share of that national title.
All right, man.
All right,
appreciate you being here.
All right,
Thanks, Ben.
Take care. Bye.
All right, final call. I see that the Peach Bowl is going to be Penn State and Ole Miss. That's a nice looking game as long as people are playing. You know, you don't know anymore. You look at these matchups, and I'm going to love all these matchups, but then it's going to hit me. Well, we got to see who's going to play. Because Penn State, boy, they took Utah to the cleaners, and they actually had some big opt-outs on defense, and they still blew out Utah in the Rose Bowl last year. But we'll have to see who's going to show up in these games. All right, Jeffrey's on the line. Jeffrey, what's going on, man?
Hey, Mark. Oh, man. You just mentioned the bowl games. I'm hoping that a lot of them have most of the guys playing. But, again, like we always say, we know why they don't. But I definitely want to talk about Florida State. I mean, I'm sure everybody already has, so there's not much that I could probably add to the table. But they should have been in. The thing is my argument is what you already said, Mark. I'm completely in agreement with you. It's based off past precedents. If you're going to put the 4 best teams into the college football playoff, and if that's the argument, then last year TCU should not have gotten in. There's just no logical reason why they got in. They didn't win the Big 12. They didn't even go undefeated. I know Alabama had 2 losses, but that's one more loss than TCU had. And it's the same situation here. Florida State has, one less loss than what? Alabama, Texas, and all the it makes absolutely no sense. If you're going to do this logic, then Florida State should have made the college football playoff. I agree that they're not as good as Texas and Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and probably Oregon and maybe Penn State and all these other teams right now. They're not. They're terrible because they don't have Travis. And even with Travis, again, I would argue they're maybe not even one of the 4 best teams. Their strength of schedule is terrible. It's like 55th. And Alabama and Texas was top 5 or whatever, however the metrics went. So I understand why Florida State is not in. But you cannot put Cincinnati in. You cannot put TCU in. You cannot put all these other teams that you've put in the past and then not put Florida State in. I know the difference is injury here, whereas with those teams, there wasn't an injury precedent. I get that. But still, Florida State did their job. They went undefeated. They won the ACC, and there's absolutely no reason why they should have taken them out. And then you've got people on ESPN right now and Fox and all the other major networks. There's nothing wrong with that. There's people on YouTube saying it. Everybody's saying it. Well, they put the best teams in there. They didn't do that before. If they had always been doing that, I wouldn't even be saying anything. I'd be like, well, I expected Florida State to not get in. They've always put the 4 best teams in there, or the 4 of the perceived best teams. So, but they didn't do that. They just completely went against what they've always done, and that's why it's not fair.
Yeah, and that's what we outlined last night. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I mean, like I said, I know that everybody knows that probably, and it's not going to change anything, but I just feel bad for them. Texas, Alabama, I mean, it ended up being right. Everybody was right. Texas, was the higher seeded team in Alabama. So if Florida State had got in, Alabama would have been left out. That'd have been crazy. But I still think Alabama should have been ahead of Texas. I know everybody thought I was insane in the chat last night. Like, everybody was saying, like, what are you talking about? But Alabama was impressive. They beat the #1 team in the country.
You're impressive for 1 week.
I know, but that's the way everybody is. Texas was impressive the last 2 weeks. Before that, they weren't, like we mentioned before. But it's funny to me because somebody wrote, they gave me a comment and said that you're acting like Alabama beating Georgia is some big feat. And I'm like, yeah, it is a big feat. No one's done it in over 2 years. And the last team to beat them is Alabama. How could you say it's not a big feat? It's unbelievable.
Absolutely. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
I think it was a Texas fan, but still, like that's where you lose the argument with me, though. Is like if you're a Texas fan, I got a Longhorns avatar on there, and you're giving me a comment saying it's not a big deal to beat Georgia. I'm like, okay, it's hard for me to take your credibility there when you're a fan of the team that I'm saying, Alabama should be over. Like if you were just a random fan and you think that it's not a big deal, I'd be like, okay. But like clearly there's bias there. That's what you always talk about, Mark. It's hard to separate bias from, actual analysis. It's very difficult because I don't think some people do that. Some people, if they're a fan of a team or they just hate Alabama or they just hate the SEC in general, they're going to be biased against that. Anybody that thinks that Alabama beating Georgia is not impressive is absolutely insane. You're not thinking clearly. Georgia's not in 2 years. Georgia's won the last national titles. Alabama denied Georgia a chance to get a 3rd one. That's impressive.
Yeah, it's arguably the most impressive win this season.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I definitely understand other people's opinions, but Alabama should have been in. And it stinks that it had to be at Florida State's expense because, like I said, obviously the committee, like, imagine if Travis didn't get hurt. I mean, I don't know if you've already had the scenario, Mark, people talked about it, but if Travis didn't get hurt and they went, are undefeated, but they beat Florida and they beat Louisville by a lot more, so they look impressive. Do you think, Mark, that Louisville and Texas would have gotten in and Alabama would have been left out?
You mean Florida State and Texas?
I meant Florida State. Sorry, I said it wrong.
Yeah.
I'm tired. Sorry about that. Florida State.
Yeah, I believe Florida State would be in if they were an undefeated Power 5 champion with Jordan Travis at quarterback. Sure, and especially
So Alabama would have been
I even
left
think
out.
if they would have, I even think if they would have struggled in these games.
I mean, you could be right. That's a great point. Like, even if they struggled, they probably still would have got in with Travis. I didn't mean to say Louisville. Sorry. I'm like you. I've been up for a lot, doing a bunch of stuff. I only got like 4 hours of sleep last night, so I'm surprised I went that long without saying something wrong. But for real though, you really think that Louisville said it again? Florida State beating Louisville, and you think Florida State and Texas would have gotten in though? You think Alabama would have been left out?
Yeah, I believe that, but I'm not in the room. I'm just conjecturing. Yeah, I don't think they leave out a Power 5 champion, undefeated team with one of the best starting quarterbacks in the country.
Because I've seen some people say online, and again, it's just opinions online, but I've seen some people say that if Florida State got in with Travis, then they would have put Alabama in over Texas because it's the SEC and you can't leave them out. That's what I've seen people say. And I don't think that's necessarily true, but it's hard as a precedent because the SEC's never been left out before, ever, in the playoffs. But since Florida State, they knocked out, they just went ahead and left Texas ahead of Bama so people wouldn't complain, oh, the head-to-head, it should count, so Texas got in, which I understand, but still, to me, if Florida State got in the playoff, Alabama had to be in. I know why people say it shouldn't, the head-to-head, but to me, you can't leave them out.
The rankings tell us otherwise, but I don't think the rankings tell us the complete truth of what the committee is, because once they make those 4 selections, then they can do whatever they want with the other rankings that are close to number 4 to make it look like they were considering certain teams. So, for example, let's say Alabama was out of the mix, and let's say it was Georgia's resume up against Florida State, and it was Florida State, no Jordan Travis, exactly the same situation, and Georgia, exactly what just happened. But let's say Alabama was like 8-4, and they just made their way through an awful SEC West, and then they beat Georgia. Regardless, Georgia's resume was exactly the same. I believe this committee would have put Georgia in over Florida State. Even though they put Florida State at 5 and put Georgia at 6, I think they just did that in the aftermath to show, okay, well, Florida State was close. We considered them. There they are. I don't think.
I mean, that's the dumb thing about it, though. I mean, it's kind of like that year when you had Ohio State, wasn't it like TCU and Ohio State and all that or whatever, and Ohio State was below them. They all won, but then Ohio State leapfrogged them. It's the same thing here. Texas and Alabama ended up leapfrogging, Florida State. Florida State fell to 5th. I mean, so it's the same thing.
Yeah, the 2014, people get on that, but that made complete sense to me because Ohio State beat like a top 12 team in the country by 59 points. TCU was out beating Kansas, who was like awful, one of the worst teams in the country.
I agree. So, you're right. I'm just saying in general, though, like your spot's not safe if you're not one of, like the big teams and you're playing a big team on that final day. Because I think that also shows, Mark, that the committee did not take Louisville seriously anymore either, because they didn't value the game. Like, Louisville's a top 15 opponent. That's what I kept hearing last night. Like, that was the argument for Florida State. Well, they're still beating a top 15 team. Obviously, the committee did not think Louisville was that good, because if they had thought they were good, then they would have said, well, this is an impressive win. They beat a top 15 team by double digits, but they didn't value that because Louisville, obviously had a bad, strength of schedule. They didn't play anybody. So, yeah, the committee did not think Louisville was, a great win for Florida State. Like, they were wanting 30-6 because they didn't think, Louisville was good at all. It is what it is. Like I said, I mean, the more it kept going, I had a bigger and better feeling that it was going to be Texas and Alabama getting in. But I did tweet like right before it that I wanted to see Florida State and Alabama get in. That's just what I wanted to see. I know that people disagree with me last night. Still probably do. And I get it. I totally do. The head-to-head should matter. I 100% agree. But I believe Alabama should have been in over Texas. I just believe that. And
well, the two comments you just made contradict each other.
I get that. I know they do. But
you
it's
just
like
said you 100% believe that head-to-head should matter.
I think it should matter, but see, not in every instance is basically my point. Not in every instance. It should matter, but it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. There's a lot of other factors at play. If Alabama did not beat Georgia, like if they did not have that better win, then then the head-to-head wouldn't matter. Because then Alabama wouldn't even have an argument to be over Texas at all. Texas would be over them. But since Alabama got a better win, that's why I felt that they should have been ahead of Texas. That should have negated, the head-to-head just by a little bit, because Texas, again, had the worst loss to Oklahoma. No one talks about that. Texas lost to the worst football team. Oklahoma is worse than Texas, who Alabama lost to. Again, it's all subjective. If TCU beat Texas, if Alabama had a loss to Auburn, they both be
we had the same conversation last night. So really nothing's changed.
It's the same thing. I completely agree. I know it's a retread, but it's just to point out that it was so close between the two that people saying it's concrete that Texas was over Bama because the head-to-head, I just don't agree with. There was a lot of other factors.
So if we have a national championship game, but the team that loses had a better loss, should they be?
Well, I wouldn't agree with that, obviously. I mean, for sure.
Why? It's the same situation. You're comparing two teams that played.
Well, it's because you're talking about the national championship game. That's the final game of the season. We're talking about a week 2 game. We're talking about a long time ago.
We're talking about a game that's determining this one spot.
I get that, but still, oh man, I don't know. There's no way, obviously, that I can convince anybody that Alabama should have been in over Texas. That the head-to-head was the be-all and end-all. Even though last year Alabama was ahead of LSU and Tennessee, who both beat Alabama. Which is funny to me. I think that's hilarious.
LSU didn't have the record. But Tennessee, Alabama should have been ranked behind Tennessee. They were both 10-2.
This is just me being funny, Mark. But if Texas had have lost to TCU and Alabama lost to Auburn, who would be ranked higher?
But everything else happened the same?
Everything else happened the same.
So they're out of the playoff picture at this point.
They're out of the playoff. Oh, definitely. They're out of the playoff. They both have 2 losses, but everything else happened the same, but they lost to Auburn and TCU.
Well, I think the committee would have done what they've been doing. They would rank Texas ahead of Alabama.
So they're going to value, oh man. So they would value a 6-win TCU team over a 7-win Auburn team. Okay. I get that, I guess.
Well, Auburn only won 6 games.
I'm talking about if Auburn beat Alabama and TCU beat Texas. Then TCU would have 6 wins instead of 5, and Auburn would have 7 instead of 6. Yeah. I'm really tired, so I'm surprised I even got that right. But I think it's funny, Mark. I don't know. I know it's all ludicrous because Alabama's in. Everybody's like, Jeffrey, Alabama's in. It's no big deal. But I don't know why. I just kind of like living to die on that hill that they should have been over Texas. I don't know why. But am I wrong for thinking that at all?
Not at all. You have an argument. I don't agree with your argument, but I think it's valid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you believe that Alabama has a better resume. I don't even know if you've brought up that word, resume. You just think they're better.
Well, I kind of meant, but I guess I kept saying Georgia, just Georgia over and over again is better resume. But yeah, they beat Ole Miss, which is, a highly rated team. Tennessee, everybody says Tennessee's terrible, but Tennessee's still better than the guy was talking about the group of 5 and talking about Liberty and SMU too. Tennessee's better than all those teams. As bad as Tennessee is still way better than all those teams. Not even close.
Sure, all sorts of teams are.
Mm-hmm.
So it was Rutgers.
Auburn's better than almost every group of 5 team. Probably every group of 5 team if they play right. If they play like they did against Bama, they're better than every group of 5 team. But should be. But it's interesting.
This group of 5 selection, by the way, was wrong. That's not correct.
Actually, who got in? Because I haven't even seen the bowls.
Liberty's playing Oregon.
So Liberty did get it. Liberty got the group of 5
the committee put Liberty at 23 and SMU at 24. So here's the deal. This is a group of 5 selection, correct? So this is supposed to be the best group of 5 team. Well, what was their records against group of 5 competition? Well, they both went undefeated against the group of 5. SMU had 2 losses against Power 5 teams. You're selecting the best group of 5 team.
If
Well,
SMU
played in a
did not play those 2 Power 5 teams, they arguably could have been undefeated, and they'd be in the top 20, is your point.
And would have much better wins against the likes of Tulane and Memphis and other teams that they played in the American Conference.
But see, this is about stigma too, Mark, because you talk about Tulane. People already like, oh, Tulane's pretty good because they beat USC last year in the bowl game. So they were already thought of higher than SMU was at the beginning of the year. So that's why they were further down the rankings. You know, I think that's part of it as well. It's kind of like how Cincinnati, people don't remember that the only reason Cincinnati even got in that year was because everyone had 2 losses behind them. And as well, they almost beat Georgia in the bowl game when Georgia had a lot of opt-outs the year before, and they started the year already ranked high. So a lot of times it's where you begin the year. So, like, since Tulane already was thought of higher than SMU, I went Tulane. Tulane was ranked in the preseason. They were ranked like 23rd or something in the AP poll. SMU wasn't ranked. That's why SMU couldn't climb the polls as much. Because I agree with you. Even though I tweeted at when Liberty won and Tulane lost, I'm like, yeah, Liberty could get there. In my mind, I thought SMU should get in because SMU's a better team. I know that we've debated Alabama, Texas, but it's like this with SMU and SMU and Liberty. It's not even close because Liberty barely beat a lot of teams. People don't look at their schedule. They struggle with a lot of bad teams.
Yeah,
and SMU is way better. So yeah, I agree with you. That was a bad selection to put Liberty. Glad for them and Jamie Chadwell, but that's a bad pick. But it's gonna be wild. I'm looking forward to the college football playoff games coming up in a month. It's gonna be awesome. I know that you're exhausted, been on for 3 hours, and you were on to like 5 a.m. last night, I think.
I sure was.
How did you do that?
I don't know. I wasn't making much sense. I think Tim was the last call, and he said, "You know the reason I call you last?" And I said, "Yeah, because I'm not going to put up much of a fight. Just like right now, I'm just going to let you talk."
That is so bad.
And I'm, yeah.
I try to call in early, but then I end up usually being behind like 4 people that hit the streamer link right before I do. And then I'm on here for like an hour and a half waiting. And then because people are like, you take too long, Jeff. I'm like, everybody else takes a while too. And then I'm staying up till like 3 a.m. talking to people anyway. So then I'm like trying to wake up and go to church. It's unbelievable. Like I'm exhausted, but it's worth it. College football talk is worth it. Talking to Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, is worth it. Even at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, going into Sunday morning. It was a blast last night, even though the chat was disagreeing with me. I get your point on Texas for sure, but it was a great debate on that. I don't even know if it was a debate. Just got great conversation. And Alabama's in. It's all that matters for my family. Doesn't matter how they got in. They got in. They're number 4. I hate it for Florida State. I understand why they didn't get in, but I still feel they should have. But thanks for taking my call, Mark. It's going to be an awesome bowl season, especially if there's not too many opt-outs and a college football playoff.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Appreciate you being
Talk
here.
To you soon. Thank you.
It's our guy Jeffrey chiming in as he typically does. Yeah, there. If you notice my engagement with these calls, Tim nailed it last night, and I've known it for years. That if I'm on for, some nights it could be just an hour. If I'm done, if I'm shot, then I don't provide a whole lot of resistance, or there's not a whole lot coming out of me the last call or two, because I'm just like, let's get through it. You say what you need to. All right, super sticker. Firmus Paradox 1. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. We've got B. All right. B says, so in the new format, number 23 Liberty at 13-0 would be in the playoffs. Yes. Over number 12 Oklahoma. Unbelievable. You got it right there. So basically the college football playoff rankings are going to be the top 12. And if one of those 12 is a group of 5 team, then it's just going to be the top 12. As long as all the conference champions are in there, let's assume that a Power 5 champion is going to be in the top 12. Otherwise, they would have to go outside. Let's say last season at 10-3, maybe Utah was outside the top 12. I don't know. But if they were, then they would have to go outside the top 12, bring those teams in. So it's any conference champion, Power 5 conference champion, or Power 4 going forward that is not in the top 12, and the top group of 5 outside the 12 that they would have to bring in that would knock out 11 and 12, or in this case, just 12. So yes, B, that is your playoff. We'll have to do a look at the 12-team playoff and what that would look like this year. That's a good video idea right there. B, thank you so much for the 5 spot. Ben coming back with this. I forgot to mention how I love the argument. Well, it's how you look at the end of the year. Well, when you are playing Chattanooga, you're going to look pretty good. Go SEC. Thanks again, Mark, for the show and the platform. Well, thank you, Ben. Appreciate your support. And we posted this from Firmus Paradox. We also have Matthew. Thanks for the 5 spot. Thank you for another season of analysis, Mark. Thank you, Matthew. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. We've got PNW Ute. The enemy of your enemy is your friend. That's a good one right there. Hashtag Roll Tide. Yes, who am I going to root for in that game? Michigan, Alabama. Wow. Not a good recent history for Michigan in that game. Of course, they played in the 2019 Citrus Bowl, and Michigan led early third quarter. It's actually a very competitive game, but then Alabama kicked it into gear and won 35-16, I believe. Then you had the matchup in 2012 in the opening week of the season, one of those big non-conference NFL stadium deals with Denard Robinson in Michigan getting completely blasted by Bama 41-14. Then the time before that, I think we'd have to go all the way back to the 1999 season, the 2000 Orange Bowl. That was the Tom Brady, Sean Alexander game and the missed PAT 35-34. If we go back before that, the two teams played in the 96 Outback Bowl, and I believe Alabama won 17-14. Then if we go back before that, they played in the 87, was it the Hall of Fame Bowl? And that was a really good game that Michigan pulled out 28-24. So the top of my head, those are the meetings between Michigan and Bama. We'll have to do a look at all that stuff too. I got to get to work. All right. Thank you for that. John comes in with this. Just tuned in. How shocked are you? You agree. I don't agree. So we talked about that for the last 3 hours. I do not agree. I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked by any of this. So nothing would have shocked me. If it would have been Georgia, if it would have been Florida State, if it would have been Ohio State, would have somewhat surprised me just because they weren't being talked about, but they should have been considered as much as Georgia, or really not Alabama, because they won a conference championship. All right, Terrence, as a Michigan fan, it's time for Michigan to put up or shut up. We are in and we need to win. Yeah, this will be a third playoff for Michigan. Here we go. Let's see what you got. Michigan versus top 2 rush defenses, 227 and 156 yards respectively. That's Penn State and Ohio State. Of course, you're going to run for a lot of yardage when you do nothing but run the ball. So let's understand that. So that 227, I don't necessarily know that the yards per carry, get that thing out of the way. I hate these drop downs. They piss me off. I'm about to click on something. Stupid drop down comes in, the stupid ad. And now I'm looking at NHL scores. Okay, get that out of the way. Michigan against Penn State, 227 yards. I get it. Against a tremendous rush defense. So they ran the ball, and there were no sacks in the game because J.J. McCarthy only threw 8 passes, 46 carries. So that's a nice average, 4.9. So they did run the ball well against they did not run the ball that well against Ohio State till very late in the game. But, yeah, Bama rush defense is 17th in the country. The Auburn rushing attack's really strong. Georgia obviously has what they have along the offensive line, which I believe certainly up until yesterday was the best offensive line in college football. The LSU running game strong, Texas. So we'll see. It's going to play out. James says this, Michigan fan, I want Bama. Well, you got him. Rather prove we belong against Bama than have an easy win over Florida State. Need to prove that we are the best against the best. That's a great attitude. Shadyville, bet, go blue. Okay. And we got to all of them. Thank you so much for the contributions, folks. Very much appreciate that. I'm going to go to work now on a top 25 that actually makes sense. And I'm going to start to hit this playoff business from the Florida State angle and their gripes and complaints. I got about a list of about 20 things I thought of that they can go to war on, go to battle. And then we'll start in on the matchups at some point, and we'll look at the history of these games and all sorts of good stuff coming here at the Voice of College Football. If you've got any requests for me, then let me know. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Sponsor, we can help your business. Believe me. If you would like to know how, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail so we can partner with you and help grow and expand your business and get the word out, not just here, but through Twitter and other avenues here at the Voice of College Football. And keep in mind, let's say your business is based in a particular state or area or city, we can tailor it for that as well. And again, you're going to be shopping for Christmas. The Amazon link is in the description section of all the videos. So please use the Amazon link. It's the same exact shopping experience. We've got an SEC channel. We've got a Big 12 channel. So there would be one of two reasons you would want to lock in on these two channels. One would be you want to follow Big 12 football. You want to follow SEC football. Then lock it in on those channels. The other would be if you believe in what we do here at the Voice of College Football, even if you could care less about the Big 12 or the SEC, if you want this to continue, understand it all works together. So we need success on these other channels. Believe it or not, if you're a Michigan fan and you want the Voice of College Football to succeed, you actually want the Ohio State channel to succeed and the other channels. That's just one example because it all works together. So please subscribe to the Big 12 channel. Check it out. The SEC channel as well. The link is in the description section of all the videos right at the top because we need to get people over to the SEC and the Big 12 channels. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you being here. We are going to be delivering content constantly. So be here and leave your requests there in any of the comments sections toward videos that you would like to see going forward. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks, and sorry to Florida State. But that's the committee. They can basically do what they want. See you next time.